Chapter 1591. Inside the system world. The sky was clear and cloudless. White clouds floated lazily in the sky. The green mountains and clear waters were the only real world in this world. The black-haired young man sighed under the shade of a tree. A woman's thoughts can't be easily guessed. Really? Compared to Itagami Island, the system world was more comprehensive. The scenery was more beautiful and the climate was more suitable for human habitation. At first, Wu Qin thought that if he brought Nangong Na Yu and the others away, they would fiercely object. Wu Qin had even prepared an illusion. However, the world was unpredictable. When the girls heard that they were going to play in another world, they agreed without hesitation. Before leaving, Dustless once again destroyed the world of bloodthirsty frenzy. You are really greedy. Ling Er, the incarnation of the system consciousness, frowned. When he left, Dustless used one of the strongest illusions, the infinite Tsukuyami, to kill the whole world and used the descent of the divine tree world to absorb everyone's vitality. Every time he left, Wu Qin would do this to enhance his strength. Although the means were a bit evil, Wu Qin, who was used to doing bad things, also kept calm. So what? This is a world where the strong prey on the weak. Being weak is a sin. Dustless smiled perfunctorily and said, everything ends here. Now we can change to the next world. This is good too. I can use infinite Tsukuyami and divine tree world descent to absorb the world. My strength will increase too. I hope I can go to a world with a high level of power. Dustless prayed. Ling Er couldn't control this kind of thing. In fact, it was randomly chosen. Where to go depended entirely on Dustless's personal luck. Kacha. Ling Er's seemingly weak arm gently tore apart the void, and a shocking black hole appeared. No, it was more accurate to say that it was a spatial tunnel. How violent. Wu Qin shook his head and glanced at her calmly. Then he plunged into the cave. In a strange world, the weather was clear and very hot. However, Wu Qin's first impression was that it was very cold. He subconsciously opened his eyes and saw the world in the water. F***CK. Why is she so good at picking a place? Next time she might as well put me in lava. Wu Qin opened his mouth and scolded loudly. Suddenly, a large amount of lake water invaded his lungs. He tried to mobilize his strength, but he helplessly discovered that perhaps because he had just crossed over, his body was soft and had no strength at all. Splash. At the same time, a huge wave came from the lake. Dustless looked for the source. An unexpected figure appeared in front of him. She had aqua blue hair and aqua blue eyes. Even her eyebrows were aqua blue. Her fair face was as delicate as mutton fat jade. Her bright eyes were full of vigor as she pounced on Wu Qin. Her figure was exceptionally hot. She was wearing a pure white tight-fitting uniform. Her curvaceous figure was particularly eye-catching. This girl is so familiar, Dustless whispered to himself. He secretly searched for the joy of the person. Suddenly he thought of an almost identical figure. His body suddenly felt cold. Is death? Bad luck. Why did I meet this evil star? First I fell into the water. Now I inexplicably became the prey of this woman. Dustless felt cold. He had goosebumps all over his body. His death was a famous sadist. Her greatest interest was to torture others. Although Dustless had no grudges with her, this girl came to save him inexplicably. It showed that there was an unknown relationship. In short, Dustless was in the sight of his death. Don't run. There was a faint voice from the bottom of the water. Dustless looked up. It turned out to be his death, who was close at hand. This girl was strong and good at swimming. She caught Dustless almost instantly. She held him in her arms and then rushed to the surface of the water. Although I don't know what happened, I can be sure that she is looking for me for absolutely no good thing. Dustless's expression was full of depression. Just at that moment, he keenly caught the coldness in his death's eyes. Plop. In an instant, his death took Dustless out of the water, jumped to the shore very vigorously, and threw Dustless on the ground. She pointed at Dustless and said, You want to die before I torture you? Dream on. I still have countless kinds of torture to try. This time I will try it on your body. Hearing this, Dustless was suddenly dumbfounded and asked with a speechless face, That? Although I am very grateful to you for saving me, did you get the wrong person? Miss, I don't know you. Dustless was confused by this sudden change. He just crossed into this world and did not offend his death. It was too sad to be a scapegoat for no reason. By the way, there seemed to be a body under the sea just now. That guy looked a little like me. Did his death make a mistake? Dustless bowed his head and thought carefully about the development of the matter. Soon he found a big problem. He stared at his death speechlessly. It was estimated that this girl had mistaken him for someone else. I saw a person who looked 70% like me at the bottom of the sea. The guy you said may be dead. If you don't believe me, you can have a look. Chapter 1592. However, these words had no effect. Isteth just stared at Dustless coldly. Her cold pupils did not change at all. She just stared at him quietly. More and more coldness and killing intent flowed from her body. 3 beasts. After a moment of silence, Isteth called the names of the 3 subordinates. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. 3 black shadows appeared behind her in an instant. They were wearing the same clothes and they all knelt on one knee very respectfully. They looked at Isteth with a look of worship and fanaticism. It was as if they saw God. This guy said that he was not the prince. Torture him well, let him admit it, and then let him die in pain. How dare he say that I mistook him for someone else? Isteth turned her head and left. She sat on the chair prepared in advance and watched quietly. It seemed that Dustless was not qualified for her to do anything. Prince. Dustless heard the words and his eyes flashed with surprise. After a few seconds of contemplation, he was enlightened. He secretly guessed, I'm afraid that Isteth thought I was the bullshit prince. Unfortunately, that guy is dead. Dustless could be 100% sure that the body in the deepest part of the river was the prince's. He was not the prince, but his appearance was somewhat similar. He was afraid that Isteth had mistaken him for someone else. Ah, Your Royal Highness, I'm sorry. This is the order of the minister, who asked you to do the right thing. As a result, the minister was forced to ask Isteth for help and asked us to kill you secretly. You have to understand that we are still fighting with the alien race. For you, Isteth secretly came back. Your Royal Highness really deserves to die. The blonde kid squatted and looked at Dustless. His face was full of ridicule and murderous intent. This guy seems to be called Nyo. Glancing at him faintly, Dustless's mind waned. After a while, his strength had recovered 80 to 90%. Now his whole body was full of strength. Isteth. This guy doesn't seem to be the prince. The silver-haired middle-aged man bowed and respectfully said to Isteth, they wear different clothes and are different in age. I have seen the prince before and this guy should be 2 different people. We can barely be considered acquaintances. Dustless glanced at the middle-aged man in surprise. He was also quite familiar with him. This man was called Leva, who used to be Bulat's former boss, the former general of the empire who was both wise and brave. He was framed and arrested because he refused to bribe. Later, he was rescued by Isteth and had been loyal to her ever since. Is that so? Hearing this, Isteth nodded slightly and looked at Dustless quietly. She asked, did you see other people's bodies under the riverbed? Tell me the exact location and I'll let you go if you're right. Let me go? Dustless frowned. Isteth seemed to be too proud. Obviously, she caught the wrong person, but she didn't apologize. Now she said that she would let him go. She was too arrogant. I'm sorry. Dustless turned his head and did not look at Isteth. He said loudly, I am forgetful. You are threatening me again. I suddenly forgot the place where the guy died. The tone of this guy's words. The 3 beasts heard the words and their mouths were twitching wildly. They stared at Dustless with horrified eyes. Their big eyes seemed to be about to fall out, which gave people a very shocking feeling. The dull eyes were obviously saying, if you want to die, just say it. There is no need to be tortured to death by Isteth. You guy. Not only the 3 beasts were stunned, but Isteth was also full of astonishment. Her eyes were dull and empty, gray, and lost the shrewd brilliance of the past. Interesting. Isteth, who came back to her senses, had a strange light in her beautiful eyes. She looked at Dustless curiously and asked calmly, are you forgetful? Do you need me to help you think? Really? Dustless was surprised when he heard the words. He quickly opened his mouth and pointed to the depths of his throat and said, if it's possible, thank you very much. I just drank a big mouthful of seawater. Now, please help me suck it all out with artificial respiration. After that, I will take you to find the body of the prince. Ah! After Dustless said this, there was a sound of gnashing teeth. Looking at the source of the sound, what came into view was a ferocious-looking brat Nyo. What did you say? I didn't hear it clearly. Say it again if you have the guts. Nyo was full of anger and his eyes were fixed on Dustless. His sharp eyes seemed to be looking for a suitable place to cut open Dustless's stomach. Catching the raging coldness in the depths of Nyo's eyes, Dustless sneered and shouted, are you an idiot? I will let that woman give me artificial respiration and suck the water out of my stomach. If you understand, get out of my way, you little retard. You are looking for death. The golden-haired brat was so irritated that he almost vomited blood. At that moment he attacked with his immature fist. This weak fist seemed to be extremely fragile, but it was definitely enough to easily smash human bones. For the three beasts trio, Isteth was a godlike existence. She was even bigger than the emperor of this country. Now Dustless actually let their idol do artificial respiration. How could they tolerate it? You don't know how to live. His eyelids twitched slightly, and a surge of energy broke out of his body. The irresistible repulsive force suddenly repelled him. Shinra Tensei. Bang bang bang. The brat who was caught off guard was immediately sent flying, rolling and crawling more than 10 meters away. Only then did he lie on the ground awkwardly. His head was close to the ground and his buttocks were high up. It was extremely funny. I can easily deal with you. The Scarlet Three-Tomo Sharingan stared at his death. Dustless said calmly, so, please don't humiliate yourself. Madam Miss Death. At this time, Leva's voice sounded with difficulty. He stared at Dustless's eyes with fear and said in horror, this guy is not an ordinary human being. His eyes are very strange. It seems to be something like illusion and illusion, but it's very real. Is his consciousness still awake? Staring at Leva with surprise, Dustless was quite surprised. He immediately looked at his right hand that was already bloody and nodded. This guy is very decisive. He uses pain to get rid of the illusion. He has rich fighting experience. Are you also a person with Taigu ability? Looking at Dustless's eyes, Isteth was confused. She did not remember that there was such a Taigu as eyes. The 48 Taigu of the Empire had accurate records. This ability had never been heard of. Taigu? I don't need that ability. It's superfluous for me. Dustless shook his head, then he turned and left regardless of Isteth's idea. What kind of place is this? Dustless looked around and found that there were mountains around. There was no one. It was estimated that it was a very remote place. He could not help but curse in his mind. Why do I encounter this annoying trifling thing every time I travel? Wuqian smiled bitterly. He didn't have the slightest connection with that deceitful prince, and they didn't have any relationship. It was just that their appearances were somewhat similar. Whoosh. At this time, it suddenly snowed in the sunny day. The sunlight could be reflected under the sunshine. Looking carefully, a large number of ice dregs were swept up in the sky, followed by the cold wind as expected. The footsteps stopped. Dustless looked at the empty space in front of him. Even if she did not turn her head to look deliberately, she knew that his death was coming. It seemed that she did not intend to let Dustless leave. I'm very curious about your ability. Stay and be my subordinate. No matter what your identity is, I can let you get glory and wealth, gold and treasures. There are only things you can't think of, but nothing you can't get. Isteth raised her voice and tempted. In this era where people's lives were as cheap as grass, it was lucky to be able to have a full meal. She believed that Dustless would give up the darkness for the light. Be your subordinate? It sounds good. Turning his head and looking at Isteth, Dustless joked, if you can send me to the position of the Emperor, I can barely be your subordinate. You are looking for death. Isteth was as cold as frost. The murderous intent that had been accumulated for a long time burst out, freezing the flowers and trees around. A layer of ice on the ground suddenly attacked Dustless, trying to turn him into a crystal ice sculpture. I may be your natural enemy. You are good at using ice and I am good at playing with fire. Fate is really cruel. Chapter 1594. Isteth was surprised and stared at Dustless. She did not expect him to say that. She said bluntly, although I don't know what you are talking about, but you are right, fire can extinguish water, but the same water can also extinguish fire, and I still feel that I am better than a little kid. Phew. When the voice fell, a blue streamer came to his face. He could vaguely catch the long blue hair. There was no doubt that this person was Isteth. Isteth is really a battle maniac. Witnessing Isteth's eyes when she saw the prey, her face was as excited as if she was injected with chicken blood. It gave people the feeling that she found a suitable toy. But your name is really annoying. When it comes to age, I am qualified to be your ancestor. Because of the reason of being a Jubi, Dustless got eternal youth as well as an immortal life. He would never be old, so his age had always been about 17 or 18 years old. Let me show you something. Ketan, he had not used these ordinary ninjutsu for many years. Although Dustless's technique was also a lot rusty, when Isteth was about to rush, he still threw out a dragon head with a strong momentum. Great fire dragon technique, the dragon head, which was completely composed of flames, roared out and went straight to Isteth. This kind of trick is useless. The gem-like gorgeous eyes flashed with admiration, and immediately Isteth snapped her fingers. A huge ice wall condensed in front of her, protecting Isteth like a shield. Bang bang bang. Although the fire dragon condensed by flames penetrated the ice layer, this large piece of ice was 1 meter thick, and it did not completely penetrate. It was still a few centimeters thick from Isteth's body. This guy's ability to play with ice is good. If I can give Akiji's ice fruit to her, Isteth's strength will inevitably be better, but unfortunately, Taigu is always a Taigu. Dustless shook his head. Although Taigu was good, its power was limited. It was not as comprehensive as the devil fruit, and the density of the ice made by Akiji was higher than that of Isteth, and the hardness was higher. Kakaka. Isteth waved her sword and smashed the ice in front of her. Then she turned into a storm and the cold light swept towards Dustless's head. Your speed is very fast. For a human like you to be able to do this is already a miracle. Dustless nodded slightly, glanced at the incoming blade and ignored it with a smile. He simply stood still and deliberately showed a flaw to Isteth. Humph, are you looking down on me? Isteth's delicate face became colder when she saw this, and the strength of her sword increased by 3 points. Originally, she planned to catch Dustless alive and teach this arrogant boy a good lesson. She did not expect that Dustless was not sensible enough, and now he even dared to push his luck. Poochie. The ice sword cut through Dustless's head and cut it into pieces. Why isn't it bleeding? She looked at Dustless with surprise, but what made Isteth depressed was that Dustless did not move and was not injured. She stared straight at Dustless's wound, the place that should be bloody just had a faint golden light. Then it was perfectly repaired, Dustless had nothing to do with it. You can't even hit my body, do you understand now who is the natural enemy of whom? When the voice fell, Dustless rose into the air, the flash between his legs was diffused, the golden light covered it, and he immediately aimed at Isteth's cheek and kicked. Lightspeed kick. Isteth's pupils shrank, and she quickly blocked with her arms in front of her. At the same time, she gently waved her hand, and the transparent ice shield appeared again in front of her, like a wall in front of Isteth. Kakaka. However, with a crisp sound, the shield condensed by Isteth collapsed in an instant, and the huge flash was all greeted by Isteth. Boom boom boom. The flash did not explode, but turned into a strong impact, and all fell on Isteth's arms. Phew 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 phew. Isteth, who had never been attacked by such a majestic force, looked pale, and she was kicked 20 or 30 meters away by Dustless like a gust of wind. This guy. Isteth's face was extremely gloomy, her arms trembled uncontrollably, this seemingly ordinary kick almost broke her bones. I can be sure that there is no prop like Taigu, but how did this guy do it? Does a human have such a great power? Don't be kidding. Even the super dangerous species can't do this. Isteth touched her numb right arm, and after taking a closer look, she found that there was no scar left on her white wrist. If I didn't work hard to improve my strength in recent years, I am afraid that I would be killed by that kick. Thinking of this, Isteth's face was more heavy and nervous, and even had a hint of depression and vigilance, which had never appeared before. Don't worry. Looking at Isteth who touched her wrist, Dustless waved his hand and said, I have reduced the power of the lightspeed kick as much as possible, the power will not hurt you. Anyway, you just saved me from the water. Although you're subordinates and you are arrogant, I am not the kind of person who likes to kill. Isteth's mouth twitched a few times after hearing the words, and she lowered her voice and asked hoarsely, Did you deliberately let me win? What do you think? Dustless seriously spread out his hands and asked calmly, Do you think you are my opponent? Did you just use your own strength to kick me? With your current level, that's impossible. Also, didn't I just say that I'm your natural enemy? Chapter 1595. Isteth's arms continued to tremble. She looked at Dustless with difficulty. Perhaps because of her natural belligerence, instead of flinching, the corners of her mouth were raised high, showing a charming arc. This girl deserves to be the queen of sadism. She can still smile when encountering an enemy that she can't defeat. Dustless was speechless. He stared at Isteth with some entanglement. If it was an ordinary person, he would have been thinking about how to escape. Whoosh! A row of ice dregs was shot head-on. The momentum was like a sharp blade. The number was so large that he couldn't deal with it. Especially the front end of the icicle was jumping with piercing cold light, it may even pierce through the bones. Let me enjoy the fun of fighting. Leaving such a sentence, Isteth followed the icicle and swooped down. I don't have extra time to play with you. It's more suitable to find a place to fill my stomach. Fighting. Avoid it as much as possible. Dustless looked up at the ice dregs that came head-on and moved his fingers gently. Fire release, grand fire annihilation. The sea of fire with a diameter of tens of meters roared out. The red fire rolled toward Isteth, and the ice dregs were evaporated in the blink of an eye. This guy. Isteth's beautiful gem-like eyes widened and her mood was a little heavy. To be honest, witnessing the overwhelming flame attack, she was shocked and speechless. No wonder he dares to say that he is my natural enemy. Isteth's white face was cautious. She immediately stepped on the ground with her feet. Her body ignored the existence of gravity for a moment and flew into the air. Clap, clap, clap. Snapping his fingers a few times in a row, several huge ice meteorites fell from the sky. Flame and ice were two diametrically opposite existences. The moment the ice meteorites appeared, the flame evaporated them, but the moderation of the ice also played a role in cooling down. The sea of fire that was originally monstrous also weakened a lot. Seize this opportunity. Isteth, who was staring at Dustless, rushed to Dustless like lightning. Seeing his careless face as if he was dealing with a passerby, Isteth was furious. This guy really looked down on people too much. Split into two. The ice sword in her hand fell down horizontally, and the cold light went straight to Dustless's head. Isteth smiled in surprise, and her happy face seemed to find Silver's tragic death. However, in the next second she realized that she was very wrong. Clang, clang. The ice sword was not as sharp as expected, but it was unusually slow and ordinary. Looking closely, the cold light was directly caught by Dustless with one hand. Immediately he exerted a little force and Isteth's ice sword made a caw-caw sound. Isteth's self-esteem collapsed instantly like this cracking sound. Damn it. Seeing this, Isteth did not admit defeat. Instead, she waved her hand and dense ice swords came to him. You still can't give up? Dustless shook his head. He thought that Isteth would give up after a little blow. He did not expect that the gap between her consciousness and Dustless's made her not give up, but she became braver and braver. She wanted to die together with Dustless. Sorry, I've had enough. Looking cold, Dustless's pupils turned faster, and a black flame seemed to swallow the world. Amaterasu. The black flame was like a black hole, it was born out of nothing, it swallowed all the ice cones that came to him, and even the most basic residue was not left. You want to go? At least leave something for me. Isteth was fierce and she broke out a fierce aura. Her blue hair stood up, and the area within dozens of meters was instantly turned into ice sculptures. Isteth made up her mind and shouted, Mokbotemo. The void was frozen at this moment and everything stopped. Everything in Isteth's eyes was petrified and could no longer move. Thank you for pleasing me for so long. Since I got the Taigu, you are the first one who forced me to use this trick. Walking to the front of Dustless, Isteth grabbed his chin, and the ice sword in her hand stabbed out. A huge bloody hole suddenly appeared in Dustless's body. It's over. Isteth wiped her sweat tiredly. After a few seconds, the time of her unique skill was also over. Looking at the body on the ground, when she was planning to bury it, she was suddenly dumbfounded. What is this situation? Looking at the wood on the ground, Isteth's tone increased several times. The body that was pierced by herself suddenly became a pierced wood. Genjutsu. This is genjutsu. Dustless's lazy tone came out from another direction, and he walked to Isteth with a chuckle. He said, Your strength is good, but your spiritual power is not good. Genjutsu? Isteth's face was stiff when she heard the words. She resisted the depression in her heart and asked loudly, When did it start? Why didn't I notice it? There is no need to answer this question. When you saw my Sharingan it started. Dustless explained, and one of his hands had been inserted into Isteth's clothes. Get your claws off me. Isteth noticed the big hand in her arms, and she couldn't help but be furious. She wanted to kick Dustless away, but she found that her body was as weak as if it was emptied. She had no extra strength to deal with Dustless. The big move just now had already been hit by Dustless's genjutsu, and it consumed all the strength of Isteth. Found it? At this time, Dustless's eyes brightened, and the big hand in Isteth's arms was also taken out. Of course, there was also Isteth's own banknotes. No matter who you are, you need enough money. Goodbye, Miss Isteth. By the way, let me introduce myself. My name is Wu Qin, not the prince you are talking about. Dustless explained while looking for the wallet, and his back gradually disappeared in Istetha's beautiful eyes. Chapter 1596. Istetha's cold eyes were dotted with hostility, and she had an unlucky expression. It was the first time for her to be robbed and she played the role of the victim. Dustless, let's wait and see. She slammed the ground with all her strength. Ignoring the weakness of her body, Istetha gathered her strength and stood up. Dustless, the strongest enemy she had ever met in her life, was right in front of her. How could she lie on the ground like a coward? But as soon as she stood up straight, Istetha helplessly found that her body seemed to be carrying a mountain. She had to bow again and it was difficult to move. At this moment even a worm could run faster than her. Lady Istetha. At the same time the three beasts also woke up from their coma. They looked at each other and quietly examined Istetha, who was in a cold sweat. Their mouths squirmed slightly. Needless to say, they knew the final result. Istetha lost. Damn, is that guy so strong? He is obviously just a 17 or 18-year-old boy toy. The three beasts were secretly angry. They didn't expect Dustless to be so abnormal that he could defeat the strongest in the empire and even the strongest in the world, the sadist General Istetha. You guys strengthen your training for me. I have a hunch that I will meet him again. Istetha ordered coldly. There was not much disappointment on her face. Instead, she was a little happy. Dustless's sudden rise made her boring life have some entertainment additives, which was a blessing in disguise. Boom boom boom. The violent roar resounded through the world, and a huge fire burned in the air. Are all the people in this godforsaken place dangerous? Turning his head and looking at the mountain of corpses and blood behind him, Dustless frowned. In less than half an hour he had crushed hundreds of dangerous species. Even several super dangerous species passing by during the period were killed by him. The direction of the imperial capital should be there. Looking up at the super large city in front of him, Dustless's eyes extended to the limit, and the scene dozens of kilometers away could be seen at a glance. A sizable city appeared in Dustless's eyes. There was no doubt that it was the so-called imperial capital. About another half an hour later, Wu Qin had just arrived at this decaying city. He found that countless people were staring at him with panicked eyes. They immediately fled for fear of not being able to avoid him. What's going on? I'm not a malefic star. Also, what's with this situation? Do I need to be this unlucky? Dustless complained gloomily. Looking at the figures in front of him, he dashed forward and grabbed one of them. He grabbed the yellow-haired, yellow-faced middle-aged man and asked, "Why did you run when you met me? Give me a reasonable explanation or I can guarantee that you will be torn into pieces in the next second." As his voice fell, Dustless slightly released his killing intent. The man's face instantly turned pale and he stared at Dustless in fear. He pointed at the notice board not far away, which was full of wanted posters, and said timidly, "You are wanted." "I see." Dustless heard the words and let go of the middle-aged man in his hand, and immediately walked slowly to the notice board. It was a wanted poster. After a few glances, Dustless found a young man who looked quite similar to himself. "This is the bad prince that Istetha said." Dustless frowned, and he felt that he was shot even though he was lying down. This person was similar to himself in appearance. Let's find a place to eat first. Glancing at the wanted poster next to him, Dustless turned his head and left. His observation hockey spread out and soon found a suitable restaurant. However, Dustless just walked in and scared away a group of people like a jinx. What made him most speechless was that even the boss fled with him. Boom. Immediately after, Wu Qin, who was listening in all directions, realized that there was an uninvited guest. A large number of soldiers scrambled to catch him. Their ferocious appearance was extremely angry. "You are a wanted criminal and you dare to wander under our eyes. Do you need to be so unscrupulous? You are too arrogant. Are you sure it's him?" At the same time, several obscure figures were hiding in the dark alley, staring at Dustless. These people were like dark creatures that couldn't be seen. They were all wearing black robes as if they couldn't be exposed to the light. From the wanted poster it should be him, but no one knows whether it is him or not. After all, no one has seen him and all his guards are dead. Taking a closer look, these people dressed in black robes were none other than the famous assassination organization of the imperial capital, Night Raid. But, does an imperial prince have anything to do with us? The young man with green hair asked, and there was a hint of rejection in his words. Although the other members didn't say much, their eyes were a little sad. "Oh, this is a long story." As the boss, Legenda, explained, This prince is actually the real heir to the emperor, but he was pulled down by the minister. Now he is still being chased. If we can get him to join our revolutionary army, it will be of great help in the future. Can you understand what I mean? Legenda continued, this prince is very important to us. If his news is exposed, we can attack the empire from public opinion, and our revolution will have more advantages. Then let's do it. I will personally bury those rotten soldiers. The black-haired beautiful girl with a katana said calmly, and her eyes were cold. When the entire night raid team was about to attack, they quickly found that they were doing something unnecessary, and others didn't need help at all. Chapter 1597. Dustless stared at the soldiers who swarmed over. If possible, he didn't want to attack ordinary humans, but the premise was that they didn't provoke him. Get out of my way. Looking around at the soldiers who surrounded him, Dustless said coldly, you'd better get out of my way before I get angry, otherwise you. However, there were too many self-righteous people in this world. Before Dustless finished his words, this group of people rushed to shout. Bastard, it's just a wanted person, how dare he be so arrogant? Catch this guy and beat him up. Teach him a lesson. Before Dustless finished speaking, the tide-like voices covered Dustless's voice. These idiots pointed at Dustless and scolded him. In their opinion, this guy was a dead man. How could a person who was targeted by Minister Ernest still be alive? It's hard to negotiate. The light in his hand floated. Dustless turned into a flash of light and rushed in like thunder. He was not an indecisive person. Since he gave this group of people a way to live, then they should all die. Puchi, puchi, puchi. With a wave of his arm, light flickered. With every swing of his blade, countless people were chopped to pieces. A one-sided massacre began mercilessly. Shoot. Someone screamed with a sharp voice, full of fear. Damn, this guy was too scary. He looked harmless on the surface, but according to the current one-sided situation, he was simply a living killing machine. F*ck, a person could be cut into two halves with a casual slash. This was the complete opposite of the weak prince in the intelligence reports. Cough, cough, cough. At this moment, the people of the night raid were also shocked, especially Scarlet Pupil, who planned to take Dustless away. She was a little dizzy and looked at Legenda subconsciously. Not only Scarlet Pupil but other members of the night raid also had the same look. The puzzled look was obviously saying, is this a person who is being hunted? Are you sure it's that prince? Everyone, wait a minute. Legenda was embarrassed by the crowd, and at the same time, she stared at Dustless in confusion. This decisive killing and good strength were not what the prince had. No matter what, let's take him away first. Legenda broke out her aura and immediately led the members of the night raid to the place where Dustless was located. It had become hell on earth. The sharpness of the heavenly sword of gathering clouds was too terrifying, and Dustless's strength was too great, to the point that everyone was split in half. What do you guys think of this guy's skills? Legenda suddenly asked. The guy killed so many Imperial soldiers, which is equivalent to completely offending the Empire. Even if he is not the prince, he can also be a member of our night raid. Very strong. Bullet gave a thumbs up and praised, I'm sure he's better than me. He slaughtered them so cleanly and without any hesitation. He treated the old, the weak, the sick, and the disabled equally. If he wants to be an assassin, he's definitely qualified. I can feel that he's very strong, Leona chimed in. Although it's good, it's not as good as my Taigu. Mine snorted proudly. It's very clean and his strength is also very strong. Akame nodded, she was also a master of using the sword. Dustless did not have any gorgeous swordsmanship, it was just the purest strength. That is to say, you all think he is very suitable? Legenda showed a satisfied smile. She also thought that Dustless was good, and now he still had a grudge with the Empire, which also meant that it was impossible to stand on the side of the Empire in the future. For a character like Dustless, if he joined the Empire Army, he would definitely be a terrible character like his death in the future, then the Revolutionary Army would have to pay a heavy price to deal with him. At the same time, Dustless also discovered the people of the night raid early. In fact, when they hid, Dustless saw the movements of several people. No murderous intent. Staring at several people who came, Dustless did not feel the cold temperament of murderous intent, and he was too lazy to entangle. When he was about to turn and leave, Legenda stopped him. This is... The voice in her mouth stopped abruptly and Legenda didn't know how to call him. My name is Dustless. Glancing at Legenda, Dustless replied faintly, What's the matter? I don't seem to have anything to do with your night raid and I'm not rich. The people of the night raid looked at each other when they heard the words. Their targets seemed to be those corrupt local tyrants, so many people regarded them as robbers. Are you the emperor of the empire? I'm not a prince, sorry, you found the wrong person. Interrupted impatiently, Dustless was depressed. The feeling of being attacked while lying down was really not good. Inexplicably, there were a bunch of enemies, anyone would feel depressed. Is it? Legenda was not surprised when she heard the words. The information she got said that the prince was weak, and there were even rumors that he was dead. I hope you can become a member of the Night Raid and work together for this country. I promise you. Without waiting for Legenda to finish speaking, Dustless didn't even think about it and directly agreed. He didn't even have a place to stay now. It was a good choice to join the Night Raid temporarily. What's more, he had become a wanted criminal. Since this city couldn't accommodate him, then he just needed to turn the city upside down and change the dynasty. So straightforward? Not only the members of the Night Raid were stunned, but Legenda was also stunned. She thought that Dustless would deliberately refuse, but she didn't expect this guy to agree so easily. Chapter 1598. So straightforward? Not only were the members of the Night Raid in a daze, but Legenda was also stunned. She thought that Dustless would deliberately refuse, but who knew that this guy agreed so casually? The members of the Night Raid were full of doubts. This was too fake. He joined the Night Raid without any hesitation. Did their boss's charm index increase? That's not right. Even if my charm index increased, it would be me. How could it be the boss? Leonai whispered, and Legenda happened to hear it clearly. She immediately glared at her fiercely. What's your purpose? Legenda asked cautiously. Although she didn't believe that Dustless was a spy, there were some necessary situations that must be clarified. Assassins had their own rules, especially the Night Raid, which was not an ordinary assassin organization. They were a serious revolutionary army, and the identity of the members must be clear. Purpose? Hearing this, Wu Chen was stunned. He really didn't have any purpose. He subconsciously raised his head and looked at the huge palace. I don't have any great purpose or goal. However, if I have to find a purpose, it's there. Pointing at the beautiful palace, Dustless said coldly, inexplicably wanted me, it's unforgivable. The members of the Night Raid looked at each other in dismay. Although it was hard for them to accept Wu Chen, this weirdo they could barely understand. Just because his appearance was close to that prince, he was wanted, and they even indiscriminately sent people to kill him. If this happened to anyone, it would be hard for them to accept. It was also understandable that he could take revenge on the empire or the ministers. Quick, don't let those people escape. At this moment, there was a sound of hurried footsteps, and a large number of people ran at the same time. The ground shook slightly and groups of soldiers rushed like hungry wolves. The mission is completed, everyone retreat. Legenda didn't choose to stay. After all, this was the imperial capital, the enemy's nest. No matter how they fought, they would lose in the end. The outskirts of the empire were filled with beautiful scenery. 3 days later, at the base of the Night Raid. At this moment, Legenda, as the boss, was sitting in her own position. She spat out her eyes comfortably and held a piece of paper full of information in her hand. After 3 days, the members of Night Raid had accepted Dustless as an intruder. What's done can't be undone. They had no choice but to accept the boss's orders. Furthermore, Dustless's strength was not bad. It was impossible for him to drag them down. He was also very strong. He had even given pointers to Leo, Scarlet Eye, and the others. Therefore, everyone was quite fond of Dustless. Only Lubbock wanted to cry but had no tears. Everyone was curious about Dustless, a newcomer, so he was inevitably isolated. The target of the mission has been confirmed. It's a noble family in the imperial capital. Their methods are extremely vile. After a while, Legenda said angrily, they used sweet words to deceive others, brought passers-by to their home, and then tortured them to death. Unforgivable. Rotten to the core. All these rubbish must be removed. Living rubbish will only pollute the air. After the revolutionary army dominates the empire in the future, it will not be so rotten and sad. Boring. In fact, it's all the same. Dustless smiled and said nothing. In fact, there was nothing to despise. Although the empire was rotten to the core, the revolutionary army was probably not much better. Because greed was one of the human nature, this was uncontrollable unless all the humans in the world were completely wiped out. What's more, the revolutionary army was an organization. There must be internal intrigue. With the slow passage of time, decay was also a matter of time. In the end, you still become the nourishment of my infinite Tsukuyami. Dustless raised his eyebrows slightly and said to himself, I remember that guy Tatsumi seemed to take this opportunity to join the night raid. Anyway, I have nothing to do. It's better to go out and play this time. Is everyone going to attack? Scarlet, I asked very plainly, but there was a deep pain in her words. She held the katana in her right hand and seemed to be eager to kill the family. Legenda was slightly silent when she heard the words. She looked at Dustless. The other members were all veterans of the night raid. They had performed as many as dozens of missions. Of course, I have no problem. Dustless shrugged when he saw it. What a joke, no matter how strong the enemy was, even if it was a god, how could he be afraid of an ordinary human? That's the best. Legenda's eyes were cold. The evil that justice can't punish, only we can come and kill it with a sword. The night was dark and windy, killing and arson were everywhere. In a luxurious castle like a villa, a few black shadows like crows suddenly flashed in the sky. Everyone's eyes were filled with crimson bloodthirsty light. Several people ignored the existence of gravity and stood quietly in the void. Only people with excellent eyesight and dynamic ability could catch the negligible thin line. This family is really evil. Looking up, staring at the abandoned warehouse in the distance, Dustless couldn't help but shake his head. The air was filled with the chill of decay and desolation. Through the vision of Tensigan, Dustless could see at least hundreds of corpses. Don't leave a single one alive. As soon as Scarlet Eye's voice fell, the people of the night raid jumped from the line and launched a one-sided bloody massacre. All the living creatures that they saw were killed. After all, they were assassins. There was no distinction between men and women, old and young. All the people of this family were killed. Chapter 1599. All in all, in a word, it was enough to kill one person. If there were two, he would kill a pair. It's really boring, killing those weak people is just an excuse to leave it to them. As for me, in the luxurious villa, Dustless wandered around. The life of this family was quite luxurious. The castle covered a large area, and there were countless corridors and corners. Strange, where did that guy go? Dustless murmured secretly and carefully searched every room. He was looking for a person, Tatsumi. However, it seemed that there was no trace of Tatsumi even after searching the whole villa. Did I remember it wrong? Dustless said to himself. These were the memories of hundreds of years ago in his mind. After all, he had traveled for hundreds of years. It was normal for his memory to have some deviations. On the other side, the night raid was killing this family with all their strength. There were too many people in this family, especially countless servants and professional soldiers. Obviously, they had a big background. Killing people was fast when everyone did it, but there were also some people who were lazy, such as Dustless. He had been wandering around in boredom, and he didn't kill anyone for a long time. Hey, hey, hey! Suddenly there was a dissatisfied complaint behind him. Dustless was stunned. He turned his head and saw a pretty girl with a pink double ponytail. Her appearance was delicate, her facial features were flawless, her bright eyes were as eye-catching as the moon, and her pink skirt was quite wonderful with her young body. The girl's figure was not plump, but it was undeniable that she was a person who knew how to dress herself very well. Her short body was not disappointing. Combined with her pink skirt, it made people's eyes brighten. This girl with an extraordinary appearance was mine, the night raid's night raid. Ah, I'm performing a task, didn't you see? Dustless asked with a smile. Performing a task? Looking at Dustless suspiciously, Mine looked around and asked, Where are the people you killed? I have been seeing you walking like an old man. You're lazy, right? Mine asked loudly with her chest out. Dustless was powerful, but he turned a deaf ear to the fleeing crowd around him. What was he if not being lazy? Seriously, your breasts aren't big, what's there to stick out? Dustless lowered his head and complained. His voice was as soft as a mosquito, but he was too close to Mine, so all these words fell into her ears. Mine stomped her feet angrily and immediately said with a straight face, I'm going to report this to the boss, saying that you are slacking off in the process of performing the task. As soon as the voice fell, Mine looked at Dustless with delight. Her proud look was obviously saying, Beg me? However, Dustless did not pay attention to her. No, I'm not slacking off. I'm protecting you. Dustless glanced at the blurry black figure walking deeper into the forest and said calmly, As a sniper, your close combat ability is too weak. I'll follow you and be in charge of close combat. Protect me? What a load of nonsense. Mine hummed proudly and said loudly, Your excuse is useless. You didn't kill anyone. I will report all to the boss. I didn't use your reward for this mission. After saying that, Mine turned and left. However, at the moment when she just turned around, a black figure with flashing red eyes came quickly. It almost came to the front of Mine in an instant, and the big sword with cold light slashed toward Mine's head. All this happened in a flash so that Mine was a little dazed. Your sniping is good, but your close combat is SOSO. If the enemy gets close to you, the disadvantage is too big. Dustless glanced at the attacker who was barely good, and flicked a light from his finger. Laser. A straight beam of light shot out and went straight to the person. There was suddenly a light on the head, and it was killed by the light from Dustless's fingertips. The person fell down unwillingly, and the big sword was a little distance away from crushing Mine. Damn it. Mine, who came back to her senses, scolded her carelessness. She just quarreled with Dustless, so she didn't notice the approaching attacker for the first time. If it weren't for Dustless, maybe her head would be separated from her body. I reluctantly recognize you. Mine said with a red face, and she was quite unwilling. Dustless stared at Mine maliciously after hearing the words. He put Mine in a checkmate and said with a smile, "It's a big problem to be absent-minded when performing the task. I will report it to the boss as it is." You heartless guy. Mine pointed at Dustless's nose and scolded. Her hard-earned good impression of Dustless disappeared instantly. Dustless didn't say much after hearing the words. He just looked at the warehouse in the distance quietly. There was a strange color in his eyes that was difficult to detect. He vaguely understood why he didn't meet Tatsumi. Is it possible that Tatsumi was caught and tortured by this family? Dustless looked contemplative. The character of this family was so dark and cold that they deceived all the poor people who slept on the street into their home and then tortured them severely. Phew. At the same time, all the members of the night raid completed the task and appeared one after another. There is still a dirty place that has not been solved. We can retreat after burning the warehouse full of rotten smell. Pointing to the abandoned warehouse in the distance, Scarlet Pupil took the lead to rush there. I hope that Tatsumi dies. Following the footsteps of Scarlet Pupil, Dustless prayed silently. I can smell a disgusting stench from afar. Leonette took the lead to smash the door of the abandoned warehouse. As Dustless had guessed before, a devastated wail entered the eyes of several people. Come and save me, my name is Tatsumi. Chapter 1600. Come and save me, my name is Tatsumi. Dustless was taken aback by this sudden voice, and immediately rushed to the source. A miserable young man with wounds all over his body came into view. His hair was disheveled and his entire body was covered with whip marks. The ghastly wounds were lacerated, and his flesh was badly mangled. However, the youth's eyes were bright and full of expression. Although he was severely injured, his strong will did not collapse. This kid is very tough. Dustless sighed to himself. He could see at a glance that Tatsumi was just physically tortured, and his physique was still very majestic. Clang 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 clang. Bullet raised his hand and cut off the chain on Tatsumi's body. He was surprised. After being tortured so severely, you can still live so tenaciously. It seems that you have received good training. Yes. Leone also nodded slightly, thinking that this handsome boy was quite pleasing to the eye. You don't even know Tatsumi? Glancing at Leone in surprise, Dustless found that Leone didn't know Tatsumi. The scene in the original work probably didn't happen because of Dustless's sudden rise. So now Tatsumi was directly tortured by this perverted family. Cough cough cough. At this moment, there was a violent cough in the cell which immediately attracted Tatsumi's attention. He cried and shouted, Ayas, how do you feel? Are you okay? He is incurable. Dustless came over and glanced at him and explained, he is implanted with the virus in his body. His face is pale and weak. Although he can still hold on, he is already dying. This is just the final radiance of the setting sun. He can't hold on for long. He is being observed like a white mouse, and his internal organs are corroded. You also know medical skills? Scarlet Eye and others were surprised. The members of the night raid often went out to perform tasks. Sometimes injuries were inevitable, and there was no suitable doctor among them. I just know a little bit. Dustless nodded slightly and then said softly, if you are sick in the future, you can ask me for help. The patient is right in front of you. How dare you call yourself a doctor when you can't treat him? Tatsumi, who was desperate, roared. He was deeply shocked by the departure of his best friend. Back then he had come here with a dream. Who would have thought that the imperial capital would have such a cruel start? Don't be unreasonable. Chi Tong and the others frowned. His internal organs had already been destroyed. Only a god would be able to save him. Let's retreat. Glancing slightly at Tatsumi, Dustless was too lazy to talk nonsense with this kid. Now he was just a madman. Cough cough cough, wait a minute. At this moment Aiz, who was in Tatsumi's arms, suddenly opened his mouth and begged, I hope you can take Tatsumi with you. This country seems hopeless. Everyone is a monster in human skin. This, Scarlet Eye and others frowned when they heard the words. Their task did not include this unexpected task, but it seemed inappropriate to refuse the last plea of a dead person. This guy is not bad. If we strengthen his training, he can be of great use in the future. Brant, who was kind and generous, supported Tatsumi. Although some things have deviated, what should happen will still happen. Dustless sighed in his heart. He knew that Tatsumi joining the night raid was unstoppable. Although these people were assassins, not everyone was as experienced as Dustless. In the end, their inner kindness did not abandon them. It looks good on the surface. Leone also nodded slightly, reluctantly agreeing with Brant's plan. Tatsumi was not bad. After being tortured, he was still energetic. Obviously, this piece of rotten jade was well polished. Then take him back for the time being. As for the specifics, it is up to the boss to decide. Scarlet Eye finally kicked the ball to Negenda. This kind of thing was not something she could decide. It could only be handled by Negenda. Lucky boy. Dustless was too lazy to say more. Looking at Tatsumi's relaxed face, this guy may think that joining the night raid is a good thing. There will be too many opportunities to clean him up in the future. Let's retreat. In the dark night, Dustless took the lead to turn into a black shadow and integrated into the darkness. The base of the night raid was brightly lit, and everyone gathered together. Tatsumi? Negenda sat in her position belonging to the boss, staring at Tatsumi, who was obviously still a teenager, with a little doubt and hesitation in her eyes. Boss, let me deal with this guy. After a month, I promise to train a different Tatsumi. Brant stood up and guaranteed. After all, Tatsumi was pulled in by him. It was too shameful to be kicked out. This guy is also a novice. Why do you have so many restrictions on me? Is it possible that he is handsome and can be recognized? Tatsumi stood up and questioned Dustless. Tatsumi, this kid is talking about it. Dustless had a feeling of being shot while lying down. Yes, I am more handsome than you. If you don't believe me, you can ask everyone. Dustless raised his head proudly, his white skin was smooth like silk, and his facial features were extremely evenly distributed. He completely defeated Tatsumi, this super scum. Cough cough cough. If we're talking about looks, Wuxian is more handsome than you. Brant stood up to help, and at the same time he secretly scolded Tatsumi for being brainless. Why use your disadvantages to compare with others' advantages? Are you retarded? You? Tatsumi's face turned red when he heard the words, and he stared at Dustless indignantly. Suddenly he felt that this face was an eyesore. It was simply a synonym for a jinx. Looking at each other can be contaminated with bad luck. Chapter 1601. You still want to fight with me? Looking at Tatsumi contemptuously, Dustless looked down on this guy. His companion's death could only be attributed to his incompetence. If he was a little smarter, this would not have happened. Tatsumi didn't need to have a high IQ, but he didn't have the least defense, so it was understandable that he was killed. You seem to have a problem with me. Staring at Tatsumi with a smile, Dustless said bluntly, I am the same as you. Just 3 days ago I was still unemployed. Tatsumi snorted. It seemed that he disdained to talk to Dustless. Very arrogant. Dustless frowned when he saw this. Tatsumi gave people the feeling that he had eaten gunpowder. Why don't we have a fight? Then I think you have nothing to say. Will I be afraid of you? Come on. Tatsumi rolled his eyes and looked directly at Dustless's eyes without fear. In his cognition, Dustless had white skin, a handsome face and a rich appearance. He looked like a noble young master, not like a professional assassin at all. Therefore he thought that Dustless was just a facade. That's enough. Seeing the possibility of a fight, Boss Negenda had to stand up and speak. Tatsumi's words also make sense. Dustless also joined the night raid 3 days ago. You two will learn the law of being an assassin with Akame tomorrow. Let's disperse now. She waved her hand and the crowd dispersed. Damn it, I will compete with you privately. As a newcomer, I want to see what's the difference between you. Tatsumi clenched his fist with an expression of dissatisfaction. All in all, Tatsumi didn't feel that he was worse than Dustless. Staring at the direction where Dustless disappeared, Tatsumi also chased, but he didn't take a few steps. A burly figure like a mountain blocked in front of Tatsumi. Brother? The person who suddenly appeared was Bullet. Because Bullet pulled Tatsumi into the night raid, the relationship between the two was not bad. Bullet also took care of Tatsumi. Tatsumi, go back and rest. You will learn from Akame tomorrow morning. I will train you at night, Bullet said seriously. Tomorrow? Tatsumi nodded first and immediately did not hide it. He said directly, I am going to challenge Dustless now. That guy looks like a young master. I don't think he is special. Challenge him? Bullet's mouth twitched a few times, but Tatsumi didn't notice it. That's right. That guy is too arrogant. Also, everyone clearly doesn't recognize me. I want to use that guy to prove my strength. Tatsumi's eyes were like torches. In his heart, he regarded Dustless as a stepping stone. Idiot, don't be fooled by Dustless's appearance. He's actually very strong. Bullet said solemnly, and he was speechless. Tatsumi obviously didn't know what it meant to not judge a book by its cover. Don't be fooled by Dustless's handsome appearance. He doesn't look like a combatant. Although he looks harmless on the surface like a knowledgeable scholar, but remember, all of this is superficial. Speaking of this, Bullet's tone was low, and his eyes were vaguely filled with respect. Is he stronger than brother? I heard that big sister Leonie said that you are known as the 100 Killer. Tatsumi's face was full of admiration. No matter which world, people respected the strong. Idiot. Bullet smiled bitterly and explained, 3 days ago when we went to meet Dustless to join the night raid, he killed hundreds of elite soldiers in just a few minutes. Leonie didn't tell you this. She didn't tell you this because she didn't want to break your confidence. Killed hundreds of elite soldiers in a few minutes? Tatsumi showed a shocked expression, opened his mouth, and finally stared at Bullet's helpless cheeks and closed his mouth sullenly. He was choked by Bullet's words. In the dense jungle, 3 figures stood side by side. What does catching fish have to do with being a killer? It's digression. Tatsumi asked speechlessly, always feeling that he was used as a cook. This can't be helped. In the night raid, I am responsible for everyone's favorite food. Scarlet Pupil said as she walked, holding the roasted calf of dangerous species in her hand. Is this guy really as strong as brother said? With a sigh, Tatsumi secretly looked at Dustless, who had nothing to do, and his brows frowned. It's best to find a chance to test him. Tatsumi thought so. Soon the 3 came to a vast pool. The water was very clear and very cool, and they could clearly see the swimming fish in the depths of the water droplets. You two can start. Pointing to the pool below, Scarlet Pupil continued to gnaw the meat in her hand and explained, today's lunch is to eat fish. The person who catches less has no food. No food? What? Tatsumi was stunned when he heard the words, and he jumped directly into the water without taking off his clothes. It was really boring. On the other hand, Wuxian was just sitting lazily at the edge of the pond, teasing the little fishes that swam by comfortably as if he had nothing to do with it. He had a look of indifference. If you sit like this, there will be no food for lunch. Scarlet Pupil kindly reminded him. Anyway, I have lived for hundreds of years, let Tatsumi eat. Dustless had a magnanimous expression on his face. Although he said so, he smiled slyly in his heart. There seems to be a dangerous species under the water, an unexpected surprise. Staring at the super big fish full of fangs in the water droplets, Dustless smiled even more. Chapter 1602. Deep at the bottom of the lake, Tatsumi swam around vigorously trying to catch these big fish, but he was obviously too inexperienced. This kind of fish was not an ordinary fish on the market. It was very vigilant. Tatsumi did not catch one but attracted the attention of a dangerous big fish with fangs. While he stared at other fish, he did not know that others had become others' dinner. Gulp. Looking at the right time, this super dangerous big fish took advantage of the situation. His big mouth with fangs that could bite steel went straight to Tatsumi. Tatsumi, leave quickly, you are being watched. Not everyone was as evil as Dustless. Scarlet Pupil just caught the dangerous species and stood up to remind Tatsumi. Tatsumi was shocked when he heard the words. He quickly turned his head and saw a dangerous species rushing toward him. Plop. At the critical moment, Tatsumi struggled to move his body and barely escaped from the tiger's mouth. This stupid fish. Dustless scolded angrily when he saw the situation. His eyes flashed with a cunning look. He thought in his heart, if you can't do it, let me help you. His pupils rippled with a considerable amount of eye power. The dangerous fish at the bottom of the water was suddenly controlled by Dustless. Tonight's dinner will be yours. After escaping a blow, Tatsumi's confidence soared. He decisively took out the steel sword tied to his back. Idiot, come up quickly. This dangerous species at the bottom of the water has an absolute advantage. Scarlet Pupil nervously reminded. Cough. Scarlet Pupil, there is no need to worry. Let this kid suffer. When he is in danger, we will teach him a lesson. Dustless took Scarlet Pupil's soft arm and smiled maliciously. Scarlet Pupil had taken off her top and bottom, revealing her smooth and delicate skin. Her figure was delicate, and her cleavage was unexpectedly high at a young age. Dustless did not expect Scarlet Pupil to suddenly take off her clothes, and he was a little stunned for a while. What are you looking at? Chi Tong's clear eyes were filled with doubt. She subconsciously looked down at her body, thinking that she had been stained with something dirty. When she met Dustless's gaze, she couldn't help but blush. Cough, cough, cough. Hurry up and put on your clothes. Leave the task of saving Tatsumi to me. Dustless patted his chest and promised. It was just a dangerous species. At the same time, the war at the bottom of the sea came to an end. Plop. The dangerous species controlled by Dustless, with a super tail swing, hit Tatsumi and made him vomit blood. Even because the force was too strong, it directly threw Tatsumi to the shore and heavily hit the ground. Tsk. Tatsumi is really embarrassed. Chi Tong and Dustless walked to the front of Tatsumi and looked at the bruised Tatsumi. Dustless was fine, but Chi Tong could not tolerate it. This is all because of your arrogance. If this was a one-off mission, you might have caused the entire team to be wiped out. Chi Tong's tone was extremely serious, completely different from her usual naive self. Tatsumi's mouth squirmed when he heard the words and he lowered his head in shame. Sorry, I was impulsive. Dustless smacked his lips in an extremely harsh manner, silently mocking Tatsumi. You? Tatsumi raised his eyes and looked at Dustless. His contemptuous eyes seemed to say, why are you so useless? You can't even deal with a fish. Catch it if you have the guts. Tatsumi said indignantly, otherwise please shut your mouth. You will be hungry with me at noon. Dustless did not catch any fish now. Dustless. Chi Tong's gaze also swept to Dustless, looking forward to his method. Catch it? It's very simple. Unexpectedly, Dustless suddenly sat on the ground and stared at the dangerous big fish in the water with clear eyes. He explained, this is a dangerous species called swordbone fish. It is quite dangerous. It is as terrible as its name. Its bones can be used to make swords. At the same time, its defense is very strong. Let alone in the water, even on land, it is difficult to hurt it. After all, you can't do it. Tatsumi's shattered confidence finally recovered a little. No, it's actually very simple to catch them. Dustless showed a meaningful smile and said faintly, this kind of super dangerous species is very strange. Due to its strong strength, the food that it replenishes is not proportional to its consumption, so it has a period of dormancy to recover its physical strength. It's almost time. Why do you know so clearly and so knowledgeable? Tatsumi and Chi Tong were both stunned and quite surprised. Girl. Just at this moment, an extremely human-like voice suddenly sounded. Looking over, it was indeed as Wu Qin had said. This dangerous species of big fish was actually snoring on the surface of the lake. Good opportunity. Tatsumi's eyes lit up. He wanted to catch the dangerous species, but the tingling all over his body made him unable to move. On the contrary, Dustless looked at him with a smile and said, you can train if you are not strong enough, but it's your fault if you are uneducated. Eat less snacks and read more books in the future. Damn bastard. Looking at Dustless who left, Tatsumi looked unlucky. He seemed to have become a negative example. Dustless is right. You have to know how to apply what you have learned. He has read a lot of books these days. His learning ability is very strong. Chi Tong looked at Dustless admiringly. The biggest difference between a smart person and a fool was that he would apply everything he had learned to reality. 10,000 Mammoth Heaven. A strong gravitational force was emitted from his hand, and the sleeping dangerous species was suddenly caught by Dustless. Let's go back. Dustless stretched his body and said lazily. The dangerous big fish was floating in the sky. It was particularly shocking in the eyes of Tatsumi and Chi Tong. Chapter 1603. At noon it was time for lunch at the base of the night raid. Many members of the night raid were eating around the table. Dustless was naturally among them, but Tatsumi was miserable. He stood aside with bandages all over his body and watched the people eating, drooling. But no one cared about him. Who let him fail his mission? In the end, it was Dustless who benefited. Legenda, who heard about the incident, not only did not sympathize with Tatsumi, but she secretly scolded that he was hopeless. In the water, fighting with dangerous fish species, wasn't this a stupid behavior? For a time, Tatsumi became the villain boss and became the focus of everyone's attack. Dustless smiled and said nothing. He was attacking Tatsumi comfortably while watching the show. Bullet also had a headache. After all, he promised to train Tatsumi in a month. Now it seemed that there was some pressure. If I can't defeat Tatsumi in a month, my reputation will be ruined. Looking up at the ceiling, Bullet suddenly regretted. He was obviously digging a hole to bury himself. Not good. At this moment, Lubbock suddenly exclaimed and said in a deep voice, "Our base was invaded." The target of the sneak attack was still 1 or 2 people, but there were as many as 7 or 8 people. Good job. Legenda blew a smoke ring and ordered in a cold voice, "It's probably those aliens. They dare to go deep alone, which is worthy of praise, but they chose the wrong opponent. Due to the urgency of the situation, the night raid, all members are dispatched." As the boss, Legenda's voice just fell, all the members of the night raid were dispatched urgently. Everyone was obviously experienced and jumped out of the window. Only Dustless continued to eat as if nothing had happened. This time all members are dispatched. Looking at Dustless who was standing still, Legenda repeated again, "For an assassin, if you are too lazy, your body will rust." No. Dustless just shook his finger and said, "Boss, the more shrewd the eagle is, it usually hides its sharp claws. When it is critical, it will show its ferocious side. So, this kind of small thing can be done by them." That's true. Thinking of Dustless's record in the capital, Legenda also felt that she was overqualified. Although Dustless was a newcomer, his strength was definitely second to none in the night raid. Just now, the boss was talking to Leona about something. It should be about another quest. Dustless asked calmly, "I heard that recently there's a guard captain named Oka. That guy has done a lot of bad things. The mission we received this time should be related to him." "How did you guess?" Legenda looked horrified. "That's simple." Dustless smiled calmly. "First of all, the corrupt officials of the Empire have always been the first target of the night raid. Secondly, that Appa has done a lot of bad things and has countless enemies. I heard that the night raid had accepted the mission to assassinate Oka before, but the mission ended in failure. It's right to invite you to join night raid." Legenda showed a satisfied smile and then sighed, "To be honest, his death has solved the war with a few races at the border in advance. Now she is on her way to the capital. She may return to the capital in a day or 2. So the boss is going to kill some scum in advance?" Dustless asked and affirmed, "I'm afraid that his death will rush back when she heard that I was in the capital." After all, Dustless bullied her once. It was normal for this woman with a strong desire for battle to want to retaliate. Yes, so these days we should try to eradicate those scum who have no conscience. Legenda's eyes were like torches, shining with bright colors. "Let me deal with it." Looking at the blue void through the window, Dustless took the initiative to volunteer. He had no good feelings for this deceitful empire. They inexplicably wanted to arrest him. Dustless naturally wanted to retaliate. Of course there is no problem. There is also an oil merchant who colluded with Oka. This time we will also kill him. As for the specific candidates to carry out this mission, it will be Akame and Leone, plus you and Tatsumi. Leone is familiar with the capital. Where to ambush Oka and the oil merchant, you guys decide by yourselves." Taking a deep breath, Legenda finally ordered. Her original intention was to let Dustless train Tatsumi. Tatsumi, who had not been baptized by the battlefield, was always a greenhouse flower. Of course no problem. Wu Chen's smile became more and more terrifying. It made people's hair stand on end. He didn't have a good impression of Tatsumi. He even hated this guy. He didn't like him. It would be best if he had a chance to get rid of him. On the other side, Tatsumi was trembling, and an indescribable chill spread all over his body. "Why do I feel like I am being stared at by the devil?" Tatsumi, who was carrying out the mission with Bullet and others, muttered to himself. His body was trembling uncontrollably. Puchi, puchi, puchi. In less than 10 minutes, the invaders were all slaughtered by the night raid. They were just ordinary soldiers, and although the members of the night raid were few in number, they could be said to be strong enough to fight against 100. Dealing with these shrimp soldiers and crab generals was naturally a piece of cake. There was not the slightest problem. After half an hour, everyone came back safe and sound. After the arrangement of Boss Negenda, Dustless, Tatsumi, Akame and Leone gathered together to discuss some necessary plans. Then they decided to sneak into the capital at night to kill Oka and the oil merchant. Chapter 1604. A bleak night, a bleak wind, a bleak imperial capital and a few bleak silhouettes. This combination was the most suitable. The decaying empire and the corrupt garbage needed them to clean up. You two go assassinate the oil merchant. As for Oka, leave it to me and Tatsumi. Dustless promised and pulled Tatsumi with a smile. It's just the captain of the guards. We will definitely solve him, right Tatsumi? Right? Right your ass. Tatsumi nodded on the surface, but he secretly slandered in his heart. After all, it was his first mission. It was normal to be nervous. After all, Tatsumi was just a newcomer. Especially he teamed up with Dustless, his enemy. This guy is more dangerous and terrible than the captain of the guards. Tatsumi was full of vigilance. If he could, he really didn't want to be with such a dangerous person like Dustless. No. At this moment, Scarlet Pupil suddenly looked determined. She looked at Dustless and Tatsumi and said in a deep voice, "That Oka is too dangerous. He is the captain of the Imperial Capital's guards. It is safer for the four of us to go together." You go? How can I cheat Tatsumi if you go? Dustless complained helplessly in his heart. He was helpless to Scarlet Pupil's insistence. After all, she belonged to the captain level. Then let's go. Dustless could only compromise. Then the four of them disappeared under the night sky. It was not impossible to cheat Tatsumi in another way. Anyway, this guy was stupid. He knew that he was easy to cheat just by looking at his face. It is really the most comfortable to drink after the interrogation. On the street, a ferocious-looking man shouted. His appearance was terrible and very gloomy. His face was dark and his eyes sometimes jumped with raging light. At first glance he was not a good person. That Master Oka? At this moment, a worried and scared voice suddenly sounded behind him. Who are you? Oka was stunned and turned his head to look. It was a boy in a robe. Oh no, it was a girl. This person's appearance was extremely strange. Damn Dustless, if you fail, I'll skin you alive. Tatsumi, who was disguised as a young girl, roared fiercely in his heart. Because of Dustless's bad idea, he had to pretend to be a beautiful young girl. What made Tatsumi break down the most was that Leonie and Scarlet Pupil agreed without distinguishing right from wrong. A beautiful girl, no matter who it is, will relax their vigilance around you. Dustless explained to Tatsumi before leaving. But even so, Tatsumi, who was disguised as a young girl, was not bad and he was barely acceptable. But some people were born to belong to the strange type, such as Oka. He stared at Tatsumi for a moment, and then his face flashed with anger and killing intent. Get away from me, you damn transvestite. Ugly bastard. I, Lord Oka, have a normal sexual orientation. Do you think I can't recognize a little brat who pretends to be a beauty? Die. Oka shouted angrily. He found that his IQ was underestimated. Then he waved his fist in anger and smashed it at Tatsumi unceremoniously. All of this happened in a flash. Oka hit Tatsumi's cheek with his strength, and Tatsumi was still immersed in the 3 words that Oka insulted him. Ugly bastard. How hurtful it is to my self-esteem. Boom boom boom. Tatsumi was smashed 5 or 6 meters away. His head was bleeding and he almost fainted on the spot. Cough cough cough. This is an accident. Witnessing Tatsumi's disguise being seen through and being beaten by Oka, Dustless was stunned and quickly distanced himself from it. At the same time he said in a blaming tone, Tatsumi is too immature after all. His acting skills are too bad. If it was me, I can definitely deceive Oka to other alleys to kill him. You bastard. Akame and Leone were speechless when they heard the words. You are obviously deliberately deceiving others. Oka was not an idiot. Although Tatsumi looked like a girl after disguising, Oka, who was a veteran in dealing with women, could see the clues of Tatsumi at a glance. Poor Tatsumi was deceived by Dustless. Say who sent you to approach me. Especially with such an ugly disguise, who do you think I am? Could it be that you think that I would be fooled by a few broken branches and withered willows? Can't you figure out the direction? Oka pulled out his sword and asked. The cold light reflected by the broad blade shone on Tatsumi's face. What a terrifying murderous aura. Tatsumi was full of fear. Fear flowed in his eyes. Looking at Oka who was approaching, his body retreated uncontrollably. Cold sweat fell like rain. You are too timid. You are useless. Dustless and others who were watching in the dark shook their heads. Although they were exposed because they were not prepared, Tatsumi's performance today was really unflattering. Instead of saying that he was an assassin, he looked more like a guilty conscience. I guess you are the member who specializes in assassinating dignitaries. Night raid? Very good, very good. I need your head to give me a promotion. Oka showed a devilish smile and immediately walked toward Tatsumi, who was scared out of his wits. Retreat. Tatsumi suddenly remembered the instructions of Dustless and others in his mind. He quickly rushed to a place with few people. After all, it was still on the street. He ran to the dark alley without stopping. Oka, who followed, regarded Tatsumi as a prey in his heart. Perhaps he thought that the other members of the night raid were the same as Tatsumi, ordinary people. Chapter 1605. Touching his bloody mouth where several teeth were knocked out, Tatsumi hated Dustless in his heart. When he just left, Dustless gave him a thumbs up and praised that he was very feminine. But now, damn Dustless, I will settle this account with you when we go back. He turned his head and looked at Oka, who was rushing at him crazily. His face was ferocious and he couldn't wait to tear himself into pieces. His cheeks were full of muscles and they were trembling. Tatsumi was frustrated. Damn Dustless. Thinking of Dustless, who fooled him into dressing as a woman, Tatsumi was even angrier. This guy's bad idea really made him suffer. Originally, Tatsumi thought that Oka was a monster, but now it was the opposite. Tatsumi became an important shortcut for Oka to get promoted and make a fortune. Tatsumi chased Tatsumi relentlessly. He would never let him go easily. In Oka's eyes, Tatsumi was like a delicious cake. After all, as long as he caught the members of the night raid, he could successfully offer these people to the minister. In the Empire, Minister Ernest could do whatever he wanted, so he would naturally be promoted. Cough, 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 cough. Seeing that Oka was chasing Tatsumi, Dustless had to come out and make his presence known. He said seriously, "My plan succeeded. In fact, my original intention was to let Oka see through Tatsumi's disguise deliberately." Pucci. Scarlet Eye and Leonette, who were on the way, both vomited blood. They secretly scolded Dustless for being shameless. Just now, before the plan was implemented, Dustless didn't say so. If I remember correctly, your original intention was to let Tatsumi dress up as a girl to seduce Oka, right? Leonette stared at Dustless speechlessly with an expression of, "You underestimate my IQ." "No, no," Dustless quickly shook his finger and said in a deep voice, "This is just what I meant on the surface. Actually, my real intention is to deliberately expose Taz's disguise so that Oka will be suspicious of him." Although Oka looked very rough on the surface, he was a man who was rough in his heart. Realizing that something was wrong, he would definitely not let Tatsumi go easily. And Tatsumi's performance was also within my expectations. It's his first mission and he's really scared. Really? Chi Tong looked doubtfully at Dustless's thoughtful face. Soon after, his gaze locked onto Oka, who was chasing after Dustless. He immediately praised, "Shinjun, you are so smart." Cough, cough, cough. Dustless's face turned slightly red. Was that really the case? In fact, this was indeed the case. Dustless intended to use Oka's hand to kill Tatsumi, but this kid's protagonist aura was not a joke. His own strength was not bad and he was slightly better than Oka, so he temporarily escaped the disaster. It's almost done. Tatsumi quickly ran to the previously agreed alley. It was dark and silent. There was no one around. There was only Tatsumi, who was desperately escaping, and Oka, who was crazy. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. At this moment, Tatsumi's footsteps suddenly stopped. He turned his head and stared at Oka with a gloomy face. Moreover, his cold sword was unsheathed. "You broke 7 or 8 of my teeth and I will pay you back double." At this moment, Tatsumi, who was furious, finally looked like an assassin. He was eager to take revenge, and the tingling in his mouth made him feel ashamed. He couldn't forgive this guy. For a moment, his fear was forgotten. "Yo, good eyesight." Oka glanced at Tatsumi with slight appreciation, and then his eyes emitted a fierce light. "Unfortunately, your opponent is Master Oka." Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As his voice faded, Oka's broad blade swept out like a wave, directly attacking Tatsumi's neck, intending to kill him in one strike. Killing the night raid could be promoted. Under such a huge temptation, Oka broke out an unimaginable power. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. However, Tatsumi was not a vegetarian. He also practiced swordsmanship for several years. He also swung his sword. Boom boom boom. The two blades collided and suddenly there was a dull explosion. In the dark void there was a dazzling flame. That was the light that only belonged to the friction between the two people's swords. In terms of strength, today's Tatsumi was obviously not as strong as Oka, who was stronger than a cow. However, he also had an advantage that Oka couldn't make up for. You lost. Aiming at Oka, whose weaknesses were exposed, Tatsumi's sword was instantly endowed with divinity. It was incredible and difficult to resist at the same time. Puchi. Suddenly, a shocking crack appeared on Oka's abdomen. In terms of strength, I am not as good as you, but in terms of swordsmanship, if you want to catch up with me, you still need a few years. Tatsumi glanced at the corpse behind him coldly and smiled. Suddenly, he felt that today was the happiest and the most wonderful day in his life. At this time, Tatsumi's face was full of excitement. He suddenly realized that there was a raging gaze staring at him, and there was a cold light. He immediately picked up the big sword and put it on his head without hesitation. Boom boom boom. A heavy blow like Mount Tai suddenly came, and a thick blade came horizontally, and all the force hit Tatsumi's blade. He was hit by this violent force and the ground under his feet cracked. Go to hell, little brat. Oka shouted loudly. The big sword in his hand was infinitely close to Tatsumi's head. The blade that Tatsumi used to resist had been suppressed by Oka. Puchi. A dazzling light fell from the sky, and the sharp edge cut through Oka's body and divided him into two. Too embarrassing, Tatsumi? Dustless's gloating voice suddenly sounded, and his eyes were full of ridicule. At this moment, Tatsumi was extremely embarrassed. Just now he was punched by Oka and his face was red. Chapter 1606. Oka turned his head with difficulty and saw Wu Chen's frosty face. That disdainful look was obviously like looking at an ant struggling on the verge of death. You are lucky. Glancing at Tatsumi, who was still in shock, he had no choice but to save this kid. If Dustless didn't do it, Akame and Leone would kill Oka. Since Tatsumi would be saved no matter what the result was, Dustless might as well take the initiative to attack, and he could also get a super good reputation of saving companions. It's all your fault. Tatsumi, who was rescued, found that Dustless appeared, and immediately jumped up like a furious lion. He pointed at him and scolded, "It's all your bad idea to let me dress up as a man. This is because your acting skills are not good enough. You can't even dress up as a woman, let alone be an assassin." Dustless shrugged with an expression of, "You are too weak." What's more, his plain face suddenly became extremely cold. Dustless exuded a chill and said coldly, "You are so rude to your savior, pay attention to your attitude. This guy is so strong." Tatsumi's face immediately changed, and his face was full of fear. If Oka, who was just killed, was a dangerous species, then Dustless was a super dangerous species that was dozens of times stronger than the dangerous species. "Tatsumi, how do you feel?" Akame and Leone asked. "You should be careful in the future. Although your strength is stronger than Oka, it is still impossible to kill him in seconds. If you are as ruthless as Dustless, it is best to split him into pieces." "I understand." Tatsumi nodded and looked at Oka, who was split into two. His intestines were clearly visible and the smell of blood was pungent. His face was pale and he resisted the tumbling of his internal organs. If he vomited, it would be too shameful. "Retreat," it is estimated that many people have noticed. Dustless suggested after looking around with his bright eyes. He had already heard the sound of hurried footsteps. "You and Tatsumi go back to the base for the time being. As for the oil merchant who colluded with Oka, Leona and I will deal with him." "Scarlet," I said to Dustless. Swish, swish. It was also at this moment that a flash of light appeared in the darkness. Dodge. Although Leone and Akame did not understand what it was, they realized the danger and retreated. At the same time, they did not forget to remind Dustless and Tatsumi. Bang bang bang. Dustless took the opportunity and kicked Tazimi. Boom boom boom. Tatsumi heavily hit the wall, his internal organs trembled fiercely. Tatsumi couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Dustless used too much strength, even the wall behind him was dented. "Bastard, why did you suddenly kick me?" Tatsumi roared furiously. He was sure that if he hadn't trained, Dustless's kick would have crippled him. "Shut up, if it weren't for Dustless, you would have been beaten into a hornet's nest." Scarlet, I pointed to the place where Tatsumi stood before. It had been pierced and crushed by countless ice dregs, and there were small holes everywhere like a honeycomb. But I am unlucky. Tatsumi snorted and was speechless. He was sure that this was Dustless's deliberate revenge. In fact, when he heard Scarlet Eye and Leona's reminder, Tatsumi was ready to escape. Who knew that right at this time, Dustless kicked him flying with a bang. Even without the help of Dustless, Tatsumi could deal with it. However, Dustless saved him. Tatsumi knew that Dustless was using his position to avenge a private grudge, but he couldn't say anything. This guy is as cunning as a fox. I should stay away from him in the future. Thinking of his miserable deeds in the past few days, Tatsumi decided to avoid Dustless. If he couldn't beat him, he could hide. The ability to use ice. Glancing down at the ice dregs all over the ground, Dustless's pupils shrank slightly. It seems that she came back early. Is this female hungry wolf so thirsty to trouble me? Could it be? Leona and Scarlet Eye were also tense. Both of them heard that the Empire's strongest sadist general would return early, and the ability to control ice seemed to be the only one. Several people's eyes swept into the depths of the darkness at the same time. A young girl in a white uniform with long blue hair came into view. Is death really came early? Scarlet Eye frowned slightly. Realizing that she was in trouble, her right hand had already grasped the hilt. It's hard to imagine that a person like you would refuse my invitation and join an assassination organization. Night Raid. Are they so capable of making you admire them? Death showed a cold face. Her eyes stopped from Scarlet Eye and Leona for a few seconds. Finally, she glanced at Tatsumi and finally fixed her eyes on Dustless. Damn it, I am despised again. Tatsumi's mouth twitched a few times, and he found that it was his turn to be unlucky. Do you know Death? Scarlet Eye and Leona both showed surprised expressions. This sadist general was famous all over the world. Even because of Death's expedition to the alien race, their night raid dared to disturb the imperial capital unscrupulously. She is an enemy. Dustless scratched his head and explained, I defeated her last time. I'm afraid this woman heard that I appeared in the imperial capital, so she killed the alien race in advance to trouble me. Sorry, I got you into trouble? Defeated Death? Scarlet Eye and Leona both felt that their brains were not enough to understand the words. They stared at Dustless with their eyes wide open. This was one of the strongest sadist general in the Empire. It could be called the existence of 1 against 10,000. Chapter 1607. Is this guy so famous? Isn't he a novice like me? How can the Empire's strongest sadist general Death know Dustless? Tatsumi's eyes were full of astonishment. He didn't expect Dustless to be familiar with Death, and he heard from Dustless that Death was looking for trouble with him this time. The reason was that Dustless once defeated Death. You defeated the strongest sadist general Dash? Scarlet Eye, Leone, and even Tatsumi had the expression of seeing ghosts. Their eyes were full of emptiness and they were shocked by these words. It's all your fault. What did you do to offend this sadist general Dash? Tatsumi's tone suddenly changed. He was so depressed that he vomited blood and scolded, we all have to face the revenge of the sadist general. I heard from Brother Bullet that Death is a living pervert. You said I'm a pervert? Death stared at Tatsumi with raging eyes and said coldly, reckless kid, you'd better pray that you don't fall into my hands one day, otherwise, I will personally let you know what it's like to beg for death. Death's words were quite powerful. Tatsumi immediately shrank his neck and dared not to continue to talk nonsense. Death's aura was too strong. Let alone Tatsumi, even Leone and Scarlet Eye could feel the sense of horror. This woman seemed to be able to kill others with a thought. You all go back, staying here will only drag me down. Dustless waved his hand and stood resolutely in front of Death. Obviously he wanted to fight with her. Then you be careful, we will retreat temporarily. Without waiting for Scarlet Eye and Leone to speak, Tatsumi spoke in advance, looking at Death with fear in his eyes. He was the weakest among the 4 people. If he was caught, Tatsumi only felt a chill on his back. It's terrible. Thinking of Death's previous declaration, Tatsumi had goosebumps. If he was caught by Death, he would definitely be tortured by this guy. You want to leave? Death snorted and said coolly, there is no doubt that it is difficult for me to deal with this guy, but as for you ordinary people, you still want to leave? Death's right hand suddenly fell to the ground. After a crisp snap, the surrounding environment suddenly changed. Ka. The dark world was completely covered in a thick layer of ice. The entire alley was isolated from the outside world. The oxygen consumption accelerated, and the danger of suffocation filled the air at any time. It had become an independent small world. Break! Leona gathered her strength and punched the ice wall, but nothing happened. Only a fist mark was left behind. There wasn't even a crack. Clang 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 clang. Scarlet Eye also raised his saber and slashed at the ice wall, but the effect was minimal. Just like Leona, he only left a faint cut mark on the thick layer of ice. As for Tatsumi, whose battle power was only 5, needless to say, it was impossible to count on him. Really? Sure enough, teammates are a hindrance. Dustless sighed helplessly, and then looked at the frozen world. The blazing chakra came out of his mouth, and the boundless sea of fire swept away. Fire release, grand fire annihilation. The dark night sky suddenly turned crimson like blood. A lot of boiling steam came out of the frozen world. Facing this boundless super sea of fire, the ice immediately showed its other side, rapid melting. Amazing. Scarlet Eye and Leona admired him. The sea of fire just came for a moment, the ice wall that was a few meters thick was evaporated, and a big hole of tens of meters appeared. Sure enough. Other people are small characters, only Dustless is the problem. If we don't solve this guy, everything will be in vain. Isdeth frowned deeply and immediately relaxed. At this point, Isdeth also saw through it quite clearly. Others were small characters, and a little mouse was always a little mouse. As long as they solved their Mouse King, Dustless, all the problems would be solved. You guys retreat, this guy's target is me. Dustless said to Scarlet Eye and others, his voice was very calm. But, Scarlet Eye opened her mouth to refute, but before her voice fell, she was stopped by Dustless. We should be companions, you have to believe me. In this case, Silver could only say his trump card, companions. I believe you. Scarlet Eye nodded like a chicken, and her view of Dustless also changed instantly. For some people, the meaning of this word was very heavy. For some people, the word companion was also as light as a feather. But it happened that Scarlet Eye was a person who had absolute trust in her companions. The simple word companion meant a lot to her. After nodding, she resolutely withdrew. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. However, not long after they escaped from the frozen alley, a few figures suddenly appeared. Wanna run? No way. Isdeth's subordinates, the 3 beasts, all locked on Akainu, Leona, and Tatsumi with hatred on their faces. In the past few days I have strengthened my training and become stronger. This time I must catch Dustless and tear him into pieces. Neo, one of the 3 beasts, said with hatred. Leva and Didos looked at each other, and their speechless eyes were extremely tangled. They complained in their hearts, you didn't even touch his body last time and this time you want to crush him? Don't dream. That's a god, he can even defeat Isdeth Sama. Chapter 1608. On the other hand, they were also in a stalemate. You are really haunting me, why are you so obsessed with me? His eyes stared helplessly at Isdeth, who was full of fighting intent. Dustless's expression was slightly stiff. He knew that the result was like a moth flying into the flame, and the end of self-destruction, but he still rushed to her without hesitation. What kind of behavior was this? Typical death-seeking. Who knows? Isdeth answered perfunctorily. In an instant, a big ice sword appeared in her hand. She stared at Dustless like a torch, then she turned into a flash and rushed to Dustless. Whoosh 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 whoosh. The light that cut through the night sky was very dazzling, like the morning star in the dark. It went straight to Dustless's cheek. Didn't I say that I am your natural enemy? Dustless had a headache, he suddenly felt that Isdeth was also a persevering problem child. Kakaka. Dustless did not block, the ice edge was unstoppable, it cut to Dustless's head. However, there was no scene that Isdeth expected, but the ice sword with high hardness collapsed instantly. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Seeing such a strange situation happening, Isdeth quickly opened a distance with Dustless. She was particularly depressed and even speechless. The result was a big blow to her. What kind of taigu does this guy use? He has so many abilities. Isdeth slandered in her mind, but her arms were attached to the ground. Kakaka. In an instant, the earth was once again eroded by thick ice. Countless sharp thorns rose from the ground and stabbed to Dustless's eyes. Perhaps Isdeth thought that human eyes were the weakest place. No one was an exception. Shinra Tensei. The invisible repulsive force broke out, the attacking ice light turned into nothing in an instant, it turned into crystal fragments in the sky, like snow, it was blown away by the wind and drifted to the distance. Now you are not my opponent. Glancing at Isteth faintly, Dustless said calmly with no expression. That is not necessarily true. Isteth's face was only filled with excitement. She suddenly felt that her boring life was much more interesting. Her eyes circled around Dustless with a trace of madness. I have one more goal in my life, to tame you and keep you as my pet. The water-blue eyes were full of firmness. Isteth waved her hand lightly and dense ice barbs were launched. What a crazy idea. Frowning and looking at Isteth, Dustless said indifferently, but, such an unrealistic idea will only make your invincible record more failures. Buzz buzz buzz. Under the dark night sky, Dustless's body suddenly emitted a huge radiance, like the sun hanging high in the sky. Swish, swish. The tip of the sword pierced through the night sky and pierced through Dustless's body. But it was worth mentioning that his calm face showed no signs of pain. He kept calm all the time. The overwhelming attack seemed to have not touched Dustless. He was safe and sound, quietly looking at Isteth. I am a flash person who has eaten the flash fruit. My body can be elementalized at will. All physics is a challenge for me. There is no plasticity. Calmly lifting his golden foot, a ray of light covered it. Dustless whispered, Speed is power. Isteth, have you ever been kicked by the speed of light? Buzz buzz buzz. The flash of the little foot was getting brighter and brighter and the tip of the sword was frightening. The cold sweat on the forehead was uncontrollably falling. Even with Isteth's stereotype, she was tense at the moment, as if she was facing a formidable enemy. Sorry, I was kicked by your speed of light last time. Even if there was a gap in strength, Isteth did not show weakness and choked Dustless. You woman. Dustless was quite entangled when he heard the words. Thinking of Isteth's character, he was afraid that she would not beg for mercy even if she died. Boom 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 boom. He was too lazy to talk nonsense. Dustless kicked out a huge light. Whoosh 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 whoosh. The huge flash galloped. The speed of light was too fast, and the sword was pointed at Isteth's face. Being hit by this kick, with the hardness of the human body in this world, he would be either dead or injured. Although Isteth had also been kicked by the speed of light last time, that was when Dustless did not use his full strength. It's useless to me. Isteth smiled calmly, and immediately her eyes solidified. Her thin lips spat out such a few words. Mokpotamo. When the voice fell, the world in the eyes of Isteth froze in an instant. Everything stopped. The flow of time and time, including the light, all stopped. I won this time. Isteth smiled and walked to Dustless. She took out the collar that had been prepared for a long time and put it on Dustless. Isteth had a sense of accomplishment for taming a person who was stronger than herself. After a while, the frozen space was all removed. Dustless was shocked to find that he had put on a collar. Surprised, right? Isteth put her hands on her hips and pointed to Dustless's face and said, The final winner is me, and you will be mine in the future. However, Dustless just glanced at her calmly. Miss Isteth, you are so young, your eyes have become blurry, please look more clearly. Dustless stared at Isteth with a strange look. Well? Isteth heard the words and frowned slightly. She stared at Dustless's neck subconsciously, but she found that the conspicuous collar had disappeared. At the same time, Isteth felt that her neck was heavy. She instinctively reached out and touched it, but she found that it was the collar she used on Dustless's head. Chapter 1609. Damn it, how did this damn bastard do it? Isteth cursed angrily. Although she had the hobby of putting collars on others, she was the sadist general, but this did not mean that she also had the hobby of being trained by others. Isteth's sadist character was only one-sided. In short, she liked to train others, liked to be strong, liked to trample on everyone's body and heart, but there was a crucial factor that could not be ignored. Isteth didn't like to be trained and trampled on by others. Hey. Dustless showed a playful smile, pulled the chain on the collar, and laughed with a very teasing tone. Hurry up and call me Master Dustless with a flattering tone. At the same time, Dustless also pulled the chain of the collar, and Isteth's body suddenly shook. Go to hell. Isteth, who was angry out of shame, gnashed her teeth, and her body burst out a more violent cold air, and a super big sword appeared in her hand. And she unceremoniously stabbed Dustless's face. This face was too cheap, her lungs were full of fire, and if she looked at it a few more times, she would be angry and have internal injuries. It's useless. Dustless glanced at the attack with disdain, his pupils widened, a ripple appeared in the void, and suddenly the attacking ice sword was annihilated. God's power. There was a crack in the space in front of Dustless. A small black hole was clearly visible, and directly swallowed the fatal attack, and then it disappeared completely like a stone sinking into the sea. Any of your attacks are useless to me, give up. Grasping Dustless's chin, Dustless joked, hurry up and call me Master Dustless. You're dreaming. Isteth clenched her teeth, her delicate face was green, and she wanted to cut Dustless into pieces. She could only vent her hatred by stabbing his bones and scattering his ashes. This evil guest, how on earth did you do it? Looking at the collar on her neck, Isteth clenched her fists and forcibly suppressed the anger in her heart. Her heart was full of confusion. She was sure to put the collar on Dustless, but she didn't expect it to be on her neck. Isteth was depressed when she thought about it. Don't tell me it's your illusion again? Thinking of the sad experience of meeting Dustless for the first time, Isteth subconsciously looked at Silver's eyes, and her eyes were full of confusion and puzzlement. You didn't use those strange eyes. Isteth was even more confused, looking at Dustless's eyes with the desire for knowledge. Do you want to know how I do it? Dustless, he grabbed Isteth's chin and said seriously, come, call me Master Dustless and I will fulfill your wish. Don't be delusional, I will definitely defeat you. Says Dethys, this guy was too annoying. Really? Dustless heard the words and smiled contemptuously. You don't even know how you were tricked and you still want to beat me? Don't you think your idea is ridiculous? Isteth was speechless. She lowered her head unwillingly and her clenched fists loosened. She didn't even know the enemy's tricks. Could she change the result the next time she met him? Obviously it was impossible. If she met Dustless again, she was afraid that the result would be the same. Am I going to be suppressed by this guy for a lifetime? Isteth was angry. She was a competitive person. She could bear being suppressed by Dustless once or twice, and maybe she could get revenge in the future, but she would never be suppressed for a lifetime. Dustless, Master Dustless. Isteth, who was forced, could only call out these 4 words, but she hated him in her heart. She swore that she would let Dustless try all the criminal laws hundreds of times in the future. In fact, it's also genjutsu. After Dustless heard the words, he kept his promise and told the truth. Impossible, you can only release genjutsu with those strange eyes. Isteth questioned for the first time and stared at Dustless with annoyance. She couldn't wait to bite Dustless to death. He called Master Dustless, but casually made up an answer to fool her. How dare he? This is a fact. Did I tell you that you can only use genjutsu with Sharingan? Dustless asked and then said lightly, Isteth, you are too immature after all. When fighting, don't use your eyes to see, but use your heart to feel the changes in the environment. Things like eyes are sometimes unreliable. It makes sense. Isteth nodded and immediately stared at Dustless in surprise. She was puzzled. You exposed your advantages, aren't you afraid that I will turn the tables? Turn the tables? It seemed that he heard the funniest joke. Dustless grinned. Will sharks be afraid of small sardines? Will eagles that fly high be afraid of the blue sky? Will a strong giant be afraid of a weak baby? Isteth wanted to argue, but she was speechless. She lost everything in the 2 battles. Not to mention making Dustless bleed, she couldn't even touch Dustless's body. This is a good opportunity. Looking at Dustless, who had a lazy expression, Isteth's eyes flashed with ferocity. She opened her mouth to bite Dustless's face. All this happened too fast and too suddenly. Dustless didn't notice it. After all, Isteth was still wearing a collar around her neck, so Dustless suffered a loss. Although Dustless retreated at the first time, Isteth, who desperately wanted to make Dustless suffer a loss, broke out the limit of speed and suddenly caught Dustless's body. And she opened her mouth and bit Dustless's lower lip. Chapter 16:10. Dustless was dumbfounded, and there were ripples in his heart. He didn't expect Isteth to be so crazy. This ferocious look was like she wanted to die together with him. What the f***ck? After a while, Dustless's throat burst out such a sentence. It was enough to see his depression. Would a normal woman desperately want to bite a person to death? Of course not, especially biting the sensitive place like the mouth. But Dustless found that he was wrong. His opponent was a problem girl, Isteth. Especially now, Dustless's behavior completely trampled on the dignity of Isteth. In order to get revenge on himself, she had thrown away everything. Woo! There was also a choking sound in Isteth's mouth because her gums were biting Dustless's lower lip. Her words were vague and he couldn't hear what Isteth wanted to express. However, seeing her proud smile, Dustless also vaguely guessed what it meant. Aren't you arrogant? Aren't you proud? I'll make you bleed now. Although Dustless couldn't hear what Isteth wanted to say from the corner of her mouth, it was roughly like this. I'm a little bit impressed by you. Staring calmly at Isteth, who was close at hand, Dustless praised, this kind of mentality is worthy of praise. You are indeed the strongest sadist general of the Empire. Because Isteth was biting his lower lip, Dustless could even feel the heat in Isteth's mouth. Woo! Isteth continued to choke with a smile, and at the same time she increased the strength of her bite. Her teeth sank deep into Dustless's lips. She looked at Dustless expectantly, trying to find a painful expression, but Isteth was destined to be disappointed. After so many years, Dustless had already lost the feeling of pain, and there was no reaction at all. You are a little bit arrogant. After a while, Dustless's mouth came out with such a cold sentence, and then he whispered, I'll teach you a lesson so you won't be so self-righteous. Armament hockey hardening. The moment he said that, Dustless's mouth became as hard as steel. Ha! But Isteth was instantly miserable. What was the feeling of biting the steel with all her strength? At this moment, Isteth finally had a very comfortable experience. Damn it, it hurts. Isteth grimaced in pain and stomped her feet angrily. She quickly let go of Dustless's lower lip. She wanted to cry but had no tears. This was a typical case of shooting herself in the foot. Looking at the proud face of Dustless, Isteth was depressed, her lungs were overturned and she almost vomited blood. Dustless was fine, but Isteth's gums had traces of blood. It's almost time to retreat. See you later, Miss Isteth. After taking a playful glance at Isteth, Dustless politely waved his hand, and immediately his body faded rapidly, gradually losing its texture until it finally completely merged into the night sky. Isteth didn't even have time to react, and she watched Dustless disappear into the sky. Dustless? Next time we won't meet in the end if we meet. I want you to understand how cruel my criminal law is. Isteth stayed for a few seconds, and then left after muttering to herself for a while. The base of the night raid. Although it was close to midnight, most of the members of the night raid couldn't sleep. They just killed Oka and a merchant who sold grain and oil. Akame and others took more time than expected. Boss Negenda and others were inevitably worried. Although everyone knew the rules of the killer after getting along for a long time, it was inevitable that there would be feelings between them. Akame and others couldn't return at night, and all the members were quite worried. There shouldn't be a problem, Bullet said with a little nervousness. With Akame's ability, there will be no problem. She is just a captain of the guards. Gil said softly, but her expression was tight. Obviously she was comforting herself. It's a pity that there is Tatsumi. Mine said what everyone was worried about. Akame had no problem, so did Leona. Dustless naturally had nothing to say. Although he was also a newcomer, his decisiveness in killing was more experienced than them. However, there was a fatal problem that couldn't be ignored. Tatsumi, the others were performing the task, but only this guy was dragging them down. Creak. At this moment, suddenly there was a violent sound of knocking on the door. Boss Negenda, as well as mine and others, were stunned, and then they all looked forward to the source. The figures reflected in the pupils were Akame and others. Oh, it seems that it's okay. After exhaling, Negenda's hanging heart was relieved. If Akame and others could come back, it meant that the task was completed. At the moment she showed a happy smile. However, this smile was only for a moment. After taking a closer look at several people, her face became stiff instantly. Mine and others also had the same look. Looking around, they also found that one person was missing, Dustless. Boss, when we assassinated Oka, we suddenly encountered his death. Dustless stayed alone. As for the result, we don't know specifically. Akame said the reason with disappointment. Her expression was dim and her face was pale and weak. Others were sad when they heard this. Isteth was the strongest sadist general of the Empire. In their eyes, Dustless was dead. Chapter 16:11. Everyone in the night raid bowed their heads when they heard the words. Although it was normal for assassins to leave, sometimes, it was inevitable for everyone to be sad. Just like the current scene, although the time they spent with Dustless was very short and rushed, everyone could not help but feel sad for a while. That guy is very popular. Tatsumi looked around, he didn't feel much. First, he only knew Dustless for a few days. Second, he had a long history of grievances with Dustless, especially Dustless often deliberately retaliated against Tatsumi. The relationship between the two was extremely bad. Did you encounter his death? Boss Legenda spat out an eye circle, was silent for a few seconds and immediately said, I know his death is means, Dustless may not be able to save his life. That woman? All the members of the night raid were silent. All of them together may not be the opponent of his death. His death was also one of the most feared figures in the night raid. Oh. After 3 minutes of silence, we will talk about other questions. Before Nagenda's voice fell, it was disrupted by a very discordant voice. Silence? Who do you mourn for? Could it be that Tatsumi is dead? Then God really opened his eyes this time. The serious atmosphere was destroyed by this funny voice. Everyone was stunned and immediately rushed to the source. Dustless, who was full of expectations, suddenly appeared in front of them. It's a pity that Tatsumi is not dead. Looking at Tatsumi, who was injured but full of spirit, Dustless's face flashed a deep sadness. Hey, do you know how to talk? You are dead. Tatsumi stared at Dustless unkindly. This guy can't speak at all. Dustless. Leonine and Akame smiled happily, and their desperate faces were excited. The two attacked from the front and back, and Dustless was tightly surrounded. Cough, cough, cough. Who are you mourning? Seeing everyone's resurrected face, Dustless was extremely speechless. Should it be me? His death is the strongest sadist general of the Empire. Those who are targeted by her are all fleeing. I even prepared your funeral. Looking straight at Dustless, Negenda said bluntly. It's a pity this time that guy didn't kill me. And my luck is pretty good, I have escaped from his death twice. Glancing at Negenda, Dustless rolled his eyes. No injury? Bullet asked, staring at Dustless as if he saw a monster. It was a miracle for ordinary people to escape from his death, but Dustless was intact. Let me see. Others just looked left and right, but Akame took off Dustless's clothes in a very strange way. If he didn't react quickly, maybe his shorts would be taken off by this guy. I expected his death to come back early, but why did she come back without stopping? Negenda was puzzled and said to herself. It took several days to return to the capital, but his death came back in less than half a day. She scratched her head and couldn't understand why his death was so anxious. Cough, cough, cough. Maybe it's because of me. When I didn't join the night raid, that guy suffered some losses in my hands. Maybe she is anxious to retaliate against me. Dustless shrugged helplessly. His death belonged to the best example of a person who went for wool and came back shorn. But, Negenda nodded slightly and immediately nodded. Dustless and Tatsumi's level of being assassins still needs to be improved. You two learned from Akame yesterday and you will follow mine tomorrow. Mine. Dustless and Tatsumi both frowned and looked at the pink-haired girl with double ponytails at the same time. This is the boss's decision. Do you two have any dissatisfaction? Mine raised her head proudly and put her hands on her waist. Of course. Tatsumi was more anxious than Dustless and complained loudly, I seriously protest against this guy. Mine is the kind of person who uses public office to avenge private grudges. As in the original work, Tatsumi, who just joined the night raid, did not get along well with Mine. They often ridiculed each other, and the two sides were even full of gunpowder. Idiot. Glancing at Tatsumi faintly, Dustless decisively chose to be silent. He knew that after a while Tatsumi would be unlucky. Leone. Negenda glanced at Leone and then pointed to Tatsumi. I see. Leone nodded, she clenched her fists and suddenly there was a crackling sound. She immediately rushed to Tatsumi without hesitation. Bang bang bang. Two ruthless punches fell. Tatsumi's head suddenly had a bunch of red bumps. Haven't you figured it out yet? If it weren't for Dustless, you would have been killed this time. Learn from mine. Negenda ordered seriously. Although Mine was unreliable, she also defeated Tatsumi, who was a newcomer. As for involving Dustless, it was to deliberately attack Tatsumi, hoping that this guy would be brave after knowing the shame. Although Negenda was well-intentioned, Tatsumi did not have such a long-term vision. He was full of malice to Mine. There was no way. Dustless invaded the world. Although he changed a lot of things, some things still could not be changed. For example, the relationship between Mine and Tatsumi was not harmonious as in the original work, and it was even worse now. I have serious doubts about the ability of this guy. Glancing at Tatsumi, Mine swung her ponytail and snorted, I know it by looking at his face. You look like a loser. Tatsumi stared at Mine with fire. He rolled up his sleeves. If it were not because of many people, he really wanted to fight with Mine. As for you, her sight fell on Dustless. Mine's strange sight made Dustless's face change slightly. He always felt that this weird girl was deliberately attacking him. The door was gently pushed open. The scene in front of him made Dustless lost his mind for a few seconds. He saw that Mine was preparing to wear clothes. At this moment she only wore a pink bra and pink briefs. Her white skin was all exposed in front of Dustless's eyes. Both of them were a little dull and they looked at each other stupidly for a while. Mine's room was in a mess, the clothes were scattered all over the floor. A lot of underwear all appeared in front of Dustless's eyes. The scene was suddenly very embarrassing. Boy, choose a way to die that you like. Mine's face turned red instantly, her romantic taigu, pumpkin. The front of the muzzle had condensed a lot of flashes. She aimed at Dustless's head mercilessly. The light was about to destroy Dustless's body. This has nothing to do with me. Dustless's eyes were indifferent, he said calmly. First of all, I knocked on the door, the person who did not respond is you. It is reasonable for me to break in. Secondly, the boss ordered me to come to meet the boss, so you have to be prepared in advance. Also, the boss said that there is an important task to get rich, the time is tight, I can't wait for you. You are very good at talking. Mine opened her mouth and found that she had nothing to say. Dustless's words were reasonable, she did not respond when he knocked on the door, and Legenda also mentioned this to her. But, your reaction is too strange, you look down on me, you seriously hurt my dignity. Mine's cheeks were full of indignation, the extinguished taigu pumpkin shone again. She blushed as if she had been wronged. Dustless was confused, he did not know what was wrong with this girl, he did not seem to provoke her. Is this girl's head rusty? Dustless looked at the flash that locked him, his cheeks suddenly darkened, he asked angrily, what do you mean now, tell me clearly? You don't have any reaction when you see my body, you are looking down on me, mocking me that I don't have the charm of a woman. After a while, Mine said a very ridiculous answer. No wonder the relationship between Tatsumi and Mine is so bad. This girl's head is really broken. Hearing this strange reason, Dustless could not help but be dumbfounded. He raised his middle finger to Mine's strange idea. Dustless broke into the room without knowing it. Mine's aggrieved appearance of crying was still vivid in Dustless' mind. He wanted to dig his eyes out. Now she said that Dustless had no reaction to her body, this was looking down on her, it was simply unreasonable. This time I am unlucky, I didn't look at the almanac when I went out. There is still an assassination task today, goodbye. Dustless cursed his bad luck secretly, he decisively turned and left. He finally could understand Tatsumi's pain. For Mine, this kind of thinking, he said that he was unable to deal with it. 1 second she accused him of peeping at her body, and the next second she accused him of having no lust and having no reaction to her body. Was there such a person in the world? If I didn't guess wrong, the assassination target of this mission seems to be the distant relative of Minister Ernest. In the quiet corridor, Dustless muttered, and behind him was the arrogant girl who angrily chased after him, Mine. Chapter 16:13. Mine ran over angrily. She did not expect Dustless to be so arrogant. He should know that she was his boss today. Now this guy did not even respect his boss. Unforgivable. Stop right there. Mine grabbed Dustless's hands and immediately blocked in front of him. She shouted arrogantly, I am your boss today. Pay attention to your attitude. Attitude? What attitude? Dustless ignored her, and then his face showed ridicule. He ridiculed, if you continue to take off your clothes, I must run far away so as not to get involved. Mine stamped her feet when she heard the words. Looking at Dustless's particularly annoying face, she couldn't help but be angry. She had to use her trump card, you are not qualified. You are definitely not qualified to be an assassin. Continue to be a cook with Akame. That's not up to you. The boss says so, I have no opinion. Shrugging, Dustless passed over Mine's shoulder and went straight to the direction of the conference room. You better not fall into my hands. Glaring at Dustless fiercely, Mine, who had nowhere to vent her anger, blushed and was extremely uncomfortable. Where is Tatsumi? You two novices are outrageous. One ignored my authority, and the other simply did not come to greet me. Do you still need to say it? That's because Tatsumi looks down on you. Dustless suddenly added fuel to the fire and smiled maliciously. If Mine was willing to beat Tatsumi, it would be a good deal. I will let that guy go for the time being. Mine was not fooled, but followed Dustless's footsteps to the conference room. Are you two finally here? As soon as he came in, Tatsumi's strange voice sounded. He tried to capture the depression from Dustless's face. After all, mine was notoriously difficult to serve. Unexpectedly, Dustless seemed to be fine, but mine was furious. Mine seemed to notice Tatsumi's sight. Mine just glared at him, and Tatsumi suddenly shrank his neck. Is this guy angry? I didn't offend her. Tatsumi was secretly depressed. He had a feeling of being shot even when he was lying down. He looked at Dustless gloomily. Dustless was definitely the one who set him up. Everyone move out for the night raid. Our target this time is Iokel. I repeat, that guy is a distant relative of Minister Ernest. He is protected by the masters of the Xuanhuan temple. Everyone be careful. Boss Najenda finally ordered, and then all the members of the night raid nodded and disappeared. Swish, swish. In the dark room, several black shadows were running around. Everyone's skills were extremely vigorous. Even Tatsumi, a rookie, was improving rapidly. He was trained quite well by Bullet. The members of the night raid barely recognized Tatsumi's existence. The hazy moonlight hung high in the sky, and the night was exceptionally quiet. Do you see that brightly lit villa? That is the place where Iokel lives. There are masters around to protect it. We will definitely suffer if we approach it rashly. It is not far from the capital. Maybe there will be support from the army. Hakim pointed to the huge building complex in the distance and introduced it to Dustless and others. Let mine do the long-range sniping. She is a shooting genius, so we will not be exposed. Looking at mine, Dustless suggested. Of course, I can definitely blow his head. Being praised by Dustless in public, mine was quite proud. She raised the taigu and looked like she was very strong. But, then Leonette lowered her voice and frowned. Boss asked us to complete the task tonight, but what if Iokel stays at home and doesn't come out? How can mine snipe? And if the time is delayed for a long time, it will attract the attention of the capital. Minister Ernest attaches great importance to that guy. Lubbock also worried. Recently, his death was searching for them like crazy. If there was any trouble, she would come and find trouble with Night Raid. It's actually very simple to drive Iokel out of the house. Dustless said and attracted everyone's attention. What plan? Night Raid asked curiously. It was difficult to think of a way to end the battle quickly. Hee. Dustless heard the words and just laughed twice. He did not say much. His eyes just looked at Tatsumi. The cunning look made Tatsumi vomit blood. Poochie. The water that he drank a few hours ago was all spat out. Tatsumi knew that Dustless was going to trick him again. Tatsumi went to set fire to the guy's house and he ran out. Dustless said with a smile, unless the guy wants to be burned alive, he will definitely run out of the courtyard. Why don't you go? Tatsumi asked with a black face. Hakim and others are responsible for blocking the enemy, and I am responsible for protecting the safety of mine. Only you are free. If you don't go, who will go? Dustless asked calmly. You can also go, I am responsible for protecting mine. Tatsumi argued with reason. He was particularly unhappy to be ordered by Dustless. Because I am stronger than you, so I am more suitable to protect mine. She is a sniper. She is not good at close combat. I am the one who is best at close combat. Dustless said as a matter of fact. Tatsumi wanted to cry but had no tears. It seemed that he was the weakest in this team. He had no choice but to obey Dustless's order to be responsible for setting the fire. Mine, you decide who will set the fire. Tatsumi looked at the arrogant Mine expectantly with his bright eyes. Unexpectedly, Mine's words made Tatsumi dizzy with anger. You look so bad. If I team up with you, I will definitely be killed first. Dustless is right. You set the fire, and he is responsible for covering me. Mine was very comfortable with Dustless's flattery just now. The feeling of floating had not disappeared yet. At the same time, she was disgusted with Tatsumi. This guy was much worse than Dustless. Chapter 16-14. Tatsumi even had the thought of committing suicide. He stared at Mine and Dustless sadly. He did not expect that these two people would go together, and now they even wore the same pants. Tatsumi's mind was blank and confused. Why don't you go? Looking at Tatsumi, who was unlucky, Dustless was particularly refreshed. Phew. Tatsumi did not forget to look at Dustless when he left. Then he went to set the fire without hesitation to carry out the stupid plan of Dustless. For this fantasy plan, Tatsumi naturally resisted. Last time he listened to Dustless's bad idea of dressing as a man. As a result, he was beaten violently by Aoka, who recognized him, and he even lost a few teeth. Tatsumi only hoped to survive this time. It was a good ending if he did not die. Isn't this a bit difficult for Tatsumi? Akane could not bear to stand up. In her eyes, although Tatsumi was unreliable, there was no doubt that he was also one of the companions. Don't worry, as long as I can lead Aoka out, I can kill him in an instant. Mine raised the taigu pumpkin and said confidently. If Tatsumi can't even complete this kind of thing, I will personally send him home. Bullet suddenly said it was just setting a fire. If he could not complete this, then he should not be a killer. He should go home to wash and sleep quickly. Boom boom boom. Tatsumi did not let everyone down this time. After only a few minutes of sneaking in, he set a fire in several different directions, and the choking smoke rose to the sky. It's better that the kid is burned to death himself. Sitting lazily on the treetop, Dustless picked up a grass in his mouth, and his head lazily rested on his hands, looking at the situation in the distance. After a while he reminded, Mine, the guy named Aoka is coming out, get ready. Impossible. Mine was stunned and then denied, it is hundreds of meters away from Aoka's house. You don't have any instrument to help you. How can human eyes see clearly? If you don't believe it, you can have a look. Dustless shrugged and said indifferently. This? Mine nodded slightly. Through the precise optical telescope in her right eye, the scene hundreds of meters away was very clear. Because the house was burned, Iokel, who escaped in a panic, was panting heavily, and a large number of followers followed behind him. What kind of freak is this guy? Mine scratched her head and couldn't figure out why a human being could see the face of a person hundreds of meters away. This was something that only monsters could do. Few, stable complex emotions. The taigu in Mine's hand pointed to Yokel's head. Bang bang. After a while a gunshot rang out, and a golden ray of light shot out, piercing through the night sky and instantly closing in on Yokel's head. Puchi. The next second, his head was pierced by Mine. Good marksmanship. Dustless and others were amazed. At the same time, except for Dustless and Mine, the others rushed to the ambush location in advance. Since Yokel was killed, his men would definitely go crazy. If there was no murderer they could not explain to Minister Ernest, then they would die. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Sure enough, Yokel was killed, and it immediately attracted countless killers. They all rushed to the place where Mine shot the gun. The mission is completed, let's retreat. Mine stretched out and suggested. The idea is good, but we have no chance. Dustless's sight extended to the limit, he could see the wind and grass around him. He sighed, many people are coming, we are surrounded. Oh. Mine heard the words and suddenly retorted loudly, how long has it been, how can they catch up with us? Did someone lead them here? You are really right. Dustless shrugged and looked along his sight. He found that a thin figure was running quickly. This person was Tatsumi, and behind him was a group of boxing masters of Xuanhuan Temple. This idiot. Mine's mouth twitched when she saw this. She wanted to shoot Tatsumi, this idiot. Why did he run here? He could change to another position. This kid is also helpless. Dustless rarely helped Tatsumi and said plainly, don't you understand? Tatsumi means to attract all the enemies and annihilate them in one fell swoop. Annihilate them in one fell swoop? Mine's face darkened and she glanced over. There were at least dozens of people. Could they be annihilated at will? Tatsumi's action was a blatant deceptive behavior. It seems that there is no way. Akame and the others have left. There are only 3 of us. Dustless frowned. It seemed that Mine himself and Tatsumi were all besieged. This idiot, let me kill Tatsumi first. Mine, who was angry, shouted. The pumpkin even shone and aimed at Tatsumi's head. Didn't I say before, you are responsible for sniping, and I am responsible for close combat. Dustless jumped down from the treetop and moved his waist. Under Mine's horrified gaze, a large group of lights condensed in his hand. Yasukani no Magatama. The golden light bullets instantly shot out like countless shooting stars. They were exceptionally dazzling, and they instantly tore apart and exterminated all living creatures. Puchi. 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 Under Mine's surprised gaze, the masters of Xuanhuan Temple were slaughtered in an instant. The situation was almost overwhelming. There was no difference between the strong and the weak. Anyone who was in contact with the light would definitely die. Everyone showed a painful expression. Their bodies had been destroyed and pierced by the light. They died horribly. Chapter 16:15. Looking at the horrified body, even with Mine's temperament, she was also shocked. Needless to say, Tatsumi was already scared and panicked. Grew. Mine and Tatsumi both choked and looked at Dustless with awe. No matter how the times changed, people's nature of following the strong would not change. This guy. I'm not in the same dimension as him. Up to now, Tatsumi also knew the gap with Dustless. This guy was not a human being. Was this kind of trick that killed dozens of people in an instant that a human being should have? Tatsumi's eyes looking at Dustless also changed. Is this guy a human who disguised as a super dangerous species? Tatsumi secretly guessed. In fact, not only Tatsumi had this strange idea, even Mine was no exception. She was shocked by that kind of large-scale trick. It could be confirmed that it was not a taigu, then it could only be a super dangerous species in the legend. Hey, you are not a super dangerous species that turned into a human being. Taigu aimed at Dustless. Mine asked unkindly, you are very suspicious. After hearing the words, Dustless just glanced at Mine faintly. The girl wore a pink dress, a breeze came, the pink ponytail danced with the wind, the delicate face was full of alert, the face was full of confidence, it seemed that she could kill all the enemies, she was very confident in her strength. And? At this time, Dustless's brows slightly raised, staring at the forest behind Mine, his eyebrows flashed an imperceptible coldness. Phew phew phew. Dustless's incarnation flashed, he appeared behind Mine in a flash like a light, and he held Mine tightly with the speed of lightning. Bastard, what do you want to do? Mine was shocked by this sudden move, her face suddenly became as red as an apple. When she was about to point at Dustless's nose and scold him, a sudden change occurred. Damn, your reaction is really sharp. A black shadow came out of the woods, it was only an inch away from Mine. Even the cold sword that had been out of the sheath had been taken out of the sheath, it wanted to cut Mine into pieces. Damn it, Mine scolded when she saw this. Her anger toward Dustless also disappeared in an instant. If it weren't for Dustless, maybe she would have been killed. Thinking about it, Mine felt a chill. The Imperial Fist Temple attacker who suddenly appeared shouted. The crescent blade in his hand had already stabbed forward. It was so fast that only an afterimage could be seen. So fast. Mine's face changed slightly. Because this person changed his speed quickly and ran in an S-shaped route, almost every time it was a fleeting moment. In an instant, it had approached Mine and Dustless. Since you're working so hard, I'll prepare a luxurious funeral for you. Dustless murmured as he glanced at the black afterimage. In the void, countless sharp black blades attacked from all directions. Dowbreaker 90, Black Coffin. Although this person ran fast compared with Dowbreaker 90, Black Coffin, he was insignificant. His speed was as slow as a turtle, and he was killed by Black Coffin in an instant. Poochie, poochie, poochie. The sound of the body being cut suddenly sounded. The attacker of Imperial Fist Temple disappeared instantly. There were only some bones on the ground, the broken bones and the dismembered internal organs. Vomit, 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 vomit. Seeing such a bloody scene, Tatsumi couldn't help but vomit. Although he had been an assassin for a few days, it was the first time for him to witness such a miserable ending. Cough, cough, cough. Mine coughed twice awkwardly and immediately jumped out of Dustless's arms. She pointed at Dustless and said proudly, "Don't think that you can hug me casually because you saved me." Really? Wuxian just glanced at her coldly and muttered to himself, "I wonder who was the one who was wriggling in my arms like a cat. You?" After these words, Mine instantly blushed and stamped her feet. Then she quickly turned her back to Dustless. It couldn't be helped. It was a nerve reflex that couldn't help. The abnormality of Dustless and Mine attracted the attention of other members of the night raid. When everyone rushed over, the scene was already full of screams. Among the dozens of corpses, only 3 people were alive. Mine, Dustless, and Tatsumi, who was vomiting. In the early morning of the next day, the scorching sun filled the whole sky. Yesterday's task was completed very well. You really didn't let me down, Dustless. Patting Dustless's shoulder, the boss Legenda looked very relieved. As for Tatsumi, he had been ignored by him. Boss? Glancing at Legenda helplessly, Dustless said bluntly, "The boss has a task for me, otherwise she will not come to me early in the morning." "Oh, you found it?" Legenda was surprised and immediately admitted it generously. She cautiously said, "There is indeed a dangerous person." "Is it the beheading Zank?" "The boss came to witness it because she wants me to kill him. It's better to take back the kid's taigu, right?" "How do you know?" Legenda was surprised. She didn't tell anyone about it. "It's very simple. Dustless explained and complained to himself, although the night raid is a killer, the essential purpose is to eradicate the corruption in this country. Those turbulent factors the future country does not need, are naturally the first target of the night raid. Chapter 16:16. But, at this point, Dustless's voice fell silent. He was not afraid of Zank the Decapitator. That kid was just a clown. The reason why the Empire could collapse in the future was undoubtedly due to the efforts of Scarlet Eye and the others. However, there was almost no trace of them in the rise of the new country. It was really not worth it to sacrifice for them. It's good that you know the beheading Zank. He is different from other enemies. He is a Taiga user. In the duel between Taigu, one party will definitely die, so... Nagenda's tone said until here and her voice stopped. She looked at Dustless with expectation. The meaning was self-evident. She probably expected Dustless to kill the beheading Zank alone. Unfortunately, his plan was doomed to fail. Nagenda. Next time when you discuss this kind of secret with me, you'd better look behind you. Pointing to the position of the bedroom door, Dustless spread his hands to show that it had nothing to do with him. You, Nagenda turned her head and looked. It was Akame and others who were wearing pajamas. It is too dangerous for such a dangerous person to be solved by Dustless alone. Taiga users should be solved by us who have Taigo. Akame took a step forward and volunteered. Looking carefully, Akame and mine as well as Leon and Gil, including Nagenda, were all wearing pajamas. Their curvaceous figures were exposed, but at this moment, everyone was immersed in the beheading Zank incident and ignored the sneaky eyes. Lubbock was still sleeping, Bullet and Tatsumi went out to patrol. Such a beautiful scenery only benefited Dustless. Leave it to me, I also want to see the difference between the Taiga users. Stretching deeply, Dustless walked out of the quilt, opened the curtains and enjoyed the morning sun comfortably. He closed his eyes and his expression was a little lazy. He closed his eyes very lazily, murmuring and humming a song. He seemed to be in a good mood. This guy, mine looked at Dustless with a little stupor. At present he was the opposite of the usual pompous Dustless. He looked very peaceful, warm and trustworthy. The rising sun shone on Dustless's face, which was particularly charming. I didn't expect this guy to have such a gentle side. Thinking of the experience of being hugged by Dustless yesterday, mine couldn't help blushing. She looked around subconsciously, but found that Chi Tong and others were staring at Dustless. Somehow mine was quite uncomfortable. Out of a woman's nature, mine could feel the strange sight of Chi Tong and others. Dustless in this state was particularly lazy, revealing an indescribable unique temperament. Unlike his usual sloppy self, he was very confident. No, let's go together this time. Mine took the lead in retorting with a tone that she would definitely kill Zank. Do as you like. Glancing at mine in surprise, Dustless felt strange. He was not confident when mine stared at him. After all, this guy still hated him a few days ago. Today, her tone vaguely had a sense of protection. Let's do it after dark. Seeing that everyone insisted, Nagenda no longer stopped them. Everything was opposite. There were advantages and disadvantages. Killing Zank in a group could also increase their experience in the future. After all, his death was a real Taiga user. They would meet this guy sooner or later. It was good to do an experiment in advance now. But I have a suggestion. Mine suddenly spoke at this time and rationally suggested, this is a battle between Taiga users. I suggest not to let Tatsumi participate in it. Killing Zank is too difficult for him. No problem, I will explain this to Tatsumi personally. Let's do it tonight. Sneak into the capital. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. A cold wind swept across the vast land. The Empire at midnight was especially frightening. In some small alleys one could even hear hysterical curses. The capital at night was a hell in human skin. It seems that the boss failed. Tatsumi followed again. On the abandoned building, several black shadows were looming in the night sky. Only people with excellent eyesight could see these figures clearly with the faint moonlight. The person who complained about Tatsumi was Dustless. What are you looking at? You can come without Taigu, why can't I come? Tatsumi found Dustless's strange eyes, and suddenly shouted with dissatisfaction. Whatever you want, don't blame us for not reminding you when you die, but, looking at the wanted order in his hand, Dustless was quite entangled and complained, this must be his death as revenge on me deliberately. How can I be so ugly? Just a few days ago, Dustless was also inevitably wanted, and his wanted order was all over the street. Killing Zank, the guy specially selects the person who is alone. Each of us is divided into 2 groups to walk on the street and attract that guy out. Mine and Hill were a group, Bullet and Tatsumi were a group, Lionel and Lubbock were a group. As for Dustless, this time he and Akame were a group to search for killing Zank. On the dark street, Dustless and Akame walked side by side. The bottomless street was particularly gloomy and terrifying. The deeper they went, the more obvious the screams were. We don't seem to be the target. Dustless shook his head slightly and remembered Tatsumi, who was targeted in the original work. He grabbed Akame's small hand and rushed to the area where Tatsumi and Bullet were responsible. Being suddenly attacked by Dustless, Akame struggled for a while and gave up after she had no result. She let Dustless take her to the place. Chapter 16-17. On the other side, Bullet and Tatsumi were also struggling to track down Zank. Damn Dustless. Tatsumi cursed Dustless in his heart as he walked. Since meeting this guy, his life has fallen into the most miserable period. Tatsumi, when performing a task, you have to concentrate. Looking at the absent-minded Tatsumi, Bullet suddenly shouted, "Otherwise at your level, you will never surpass Dustless in your life." Bullet had to come up with his secret weapon. The words Dustless were spiritual food for Tatsumi. So I still have a chance to surpass that guy? Sure enough, after hearing the words Dustless, Tatsumi suddenly felt refreshed and asked with great expectation, "I also hope that I will surpass Dustless in the future." Unfortunately, speaking of this, Tatsumi's mouth twitched obviously, thinking of Dustless's abnormal record. Like a deflated ball, he suddenly became very dispirited. That guy is very strong, but he is just a human being. We are all human beings. If you can work hard, you may directly surpass him in the future. Bullet smiled and persuaded, but he smiled bitterly in his heart. Don't talk about Tatsumi, he can't do it himself. He said this just to cheer Tatsumi up. Happy. On a tall building, a strange man with a hideous face looked down at Bullet and the depressed Tatsumi. His evil face was directly distorted, revealing a thrilling killing intent. "Since you are so depressed, I will send you to heaven." This person is Zank, and the person he is staring at is Tatsumi. Where did those 2 guys go? After running a few streets, Dustless did not find any trace of Tatsumi. In desperation, he could only spread out his observation haki. Why are you sure that Zank will look for Tatsumi? That guy is temperamental and his goal may be us. Akame blinked her beautiful eyes and asked. Because that guy looks like he died early. Dustless curled his lips and snorted disdainfully. This was the case in the original work. The poor Tatsumi was the first to be beheaded by Zank. If Akame hadn't arrived in time, that kid would have died long ago. Found it. After a while, Dustless's closed eyes suddenly opened, shooting out a burst of cold light. Is it Tatsumi? Scarlet Pupil asked expectantly. She was even more curious about Dustless's ability. This guy stood still, but he said that he found Tatsumi. After searching a few streets, he didn't find Tatsumi. No, Dustless shook his head. He shifted his gaze and stared at the dark street on the left. The silhouette with fiery eyes appeared on the surface of the water. We didn't find Tatsumi, but we did find Zank. No, rather than saying that we found him, it's better to say that this guy took the initiative to find us. Facing Zank's shocked gaze, Dustless appeared extremely calm. Akame's katana was unsheathed, like a knight guarding in front of Dustless. What a pity, Dustless sighed in his heart. He originally wanted to use Zank to kill Tatsumi, but he didn't expect this guy to find him and Scarlet Pupil in advance. According to Scarlet Pupil's temperament, she would never let this guy go so easily. Ta. It was also at this time that the alley on the other side seemed to have noticed the abnormality here. A burst of hurried footsteps ran over without stopping. It's Tatsumi and Bullet? After figuring out who the newcomers were, Dustless frowned slightly, sighing inwardly that Zanka was so unlucky. He didn't encounter Tatsumi and Bullet, who were relatively weak, but he encountered himself and Akame instead. Happy. Zank's excited laughter came out of the beheading man's mouth. He muttered to himself, I'm so lucky to have met you too. Fortunately, I didn't sneak attack the combination just now, otherwise I would definitely be finished. Although that kid is very weak, that strong guy is unreliable. I'm not sure if I can win against him. Kid and strong guy? Scarlet Pupil raised her eyebrows slightly when she heard this. She glanced at Zank in surprise. You should be talking about Bullet and Tatsumi, right? Dustless said lightly and asked with great interest, You're called Zank, right? You're right, bullet strength is not something you can compete with. But now that you're treating me and Scarlet Pupil as prey, do you think we're easier to deal with than Bullet? Happy, Zank laughed when he heard this and said proudly, yes, that strong guy is called Bullet? I felt a threat from that man, so I changed the prey to the two of you. How is it? My eyes are good, right? Happy. Who asked you two to be weaker than him? Is that so? Dustless glanced at him coldly when he heard this. Then light flickered on his right arm, and a slender golden greatsword was formed in an instant. Swish, swish, swish. Dustless turned into a golden light and instantly appeared in front of Zank. The greatsword containing golden light had already swept toward Zank. Poochie. This guy didn't even have time to react before he was instantly crippled by Dustless, and one of his arms was easily cut off. How is this possible? I didn't see it at all. Zank looked at the figure in front of him in disbelief. His bulging eyeballs were terrifying, as if they were about to fall out. Your eyes are good, but Bullet's is stronger than yours. This is a fact. However, Scarlet Pupil and I, who are hiding our auras, are far more dangerous than Bullet and Tatsumi. Chapter 16-18. So fast. Akame was also stunned. She realized that when Dustless appeared, Zhanka's arm had already fallen. It was too fast, everything happened in a split second. In fact, if it weren't for the sound of Zank's arm falling off, Scarlet, I would still be in the dark and wouldn't have realized what had happened. How is this possible? Zank was dumbfounded. He even forgot about the pain of losing his arm. His eyes were fixed on the young silhouette in front of him. That thin body and pale face, it was obvious that he was a pampered young master. How could he possess such unprecedented strength? Damn it. Zhanka vomited blood. He thought that the hungry wolf found a fat sheep, but the cruel scene in front of him made him shocked to find that the weak sheep suddenly turned into a fierce tiger. Even if I die, I will drag you to the grave with me. Zhanka's eyes were fierce, and he quickly launched the ability of Taigu. Buzz. The Taigu tied to his forehead flashed with emerald light, and then Zhanka laughed arrogantly. I will win this duel. Zhanka's Taigu, omnipotent 5 vision, observer. A Taigu with 5 abilities: insight, farsight, X-ray, future vision, and illusion. Insight could see through the other person's mind by observing the expression. Farsight could see things in the distance. X-ray could ignore obstacles to see the target. Future vision could see the next situation through the subtle movements of muscles. Illusion could make the other person see illusions. Are you hallucinating now? I am the closest person to you. Zhanka laughed arrogantly in his heart. His other arm had already picked up the big sword cruelly. Dustless in front of him was motionless. His expression always remained cold. Deep in his calm eyes there were no waves. Go to hell. With an excited shout, Zhanka's right arm held the big sword and slashed down. Poochie. Blood splashed into the void and scattered all over the ground. It showed a blood-red plum blossom shape, which was extremely strange. At the same time, a huge body knelt on the ground. How is this possible? The injured person. Why is it me? I should be the closest person to you now. Zank the Decapitator roared at the sky. Looking closely, a scorched wound had appeared on his chest, and the fatal wound was rapidly devouring his life force. A demon like you would even lay hands on your own family? Zhanka, who noticed that his vitality was gone, was furious. His face was full of fear. In front of this guy he was trampled miserably like a little mouse. The so-called super weapon Taigu was useless. It's too funny. Without even looking at Zank, Dustless's face only showed a touch of ridicule. The ignorant are fearless. Playing Genjutsu in front of me who has Rinnegan Sharingan, I really don't understand where your confidence comes from. No matter what kind of illusion, the essence was a spiritual attack. For Dustless, who had a huge and invincible spiritual power, this little Taigu wanted to use illusion on him. It was completely humiliating. It's almost time to come. Glancing at the figures coming from the depths of the dark street, Dustless's cheeks flashed a strange smile. He leaned close to Zhanka's ear, smiled coldly, and said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "Now, I will let you see what a real genjutsu is. Use your last time to kill Tatsumi, my loyal soldier." Ordering me? Zhanka the Decapitator was furious when he heard that. Do you think I can be ordered casually? He opened his mouth, and when he was about to mock Dustless, a majestic spiritual power invaded Zhanka the Decapitator's mind. It was more than hundreds of times stronger than Taigu. Xianxia the Decapitator instantly became strange, and he turned to stare at the intruder who suddenly appeared. Xianxia the Decapitator suddenly stood up and went crazy. Regardless of the many wounds on his body, he crazily slashed at Tatsumi. Only careful people could find that the depths of this guy's eyes lost their luster. He was just a puppet, and the person who controlled him was dustless. Why did this homicidal maniac suddenly attack me? Tatsumi looked at Xianxia the Decapitator, who was bloodthirsty, and he wanted to cry but had no tears. He just wanted to witness the scene of Dustless being brutally beaten. Who knew that Xianxia the Decapitator's brain suddenly went crazy, and he did not hesitate to kill him together. Clang. Tatsumi was not weak either. He immediately pulled out a big sword to fight back against Xianxia the Decapitator. Boom boom boom. However, Tatsumi was obviously not the opponent of Xianxia the Decapitator. The two sides just met face to face. Tatsumi was blown dozens of meters away by the force from the giant sword, and he spat out blood. Xianxia the Decapitator chased after him. When he was about to kill him completely, a shadow in armor fell from the sky, and the cold light that followed cut Xianxia the Decapitator's throat. Puchi. The cold light flashed fiercely, smashed Xianxia the Decapitator in one fell swoop, and his head was smashed into pieces. The sky even had a horrible bloody rain full of the smell of blood. Looking up, it was Tatsumi's backer, Bullet. This guy really likes to meddle in other people's business. Originally, I was not interested in you, but if you want to die, then you can't blame me for being ruthless. Dustless raised his eyebrows slightly, staring at the majestic Bullet, and a piercing chill flashed across his cheeks. He just wanted to kill Tatsumi with a borrowed knife. If Bullet meddled in other people's business, he could only kill him as well. It's good that everyone is fine. Hakim breathed a sigh of relief. Killing Xianxia the Decapitator so easily was beyond her expectations. There was no such thing as a stalemate. Dustless's attack was a one-sided crushing and annihilation. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.